Dude, thanks for coming, first
Right
off. Bowen Island,
Yes.
Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah. No doubt.
Those two things have nothing in common, except both are places where Steve Rio resides.
Yeah, that's enough.
What the hell?
It's a fairly eclectic lifestyle.
Eclectic.
Yeah. It's basically like the opposite ends of the universe, right? Like the quiet, super small community, close to nature, lots of quiet time and space. And then like one of the most insane cities on the planet. Lots of noise, lots of people, lots of energy, lots of culture.
Pandemonium.
Yeah. It's been really interesting. I was going to New York a lot before we moved to Bowen, but once we moved to Bowen, that transition, like when I travel there, like the first couple days when I first get to New York is always just, I can't really sleep for the first couple days.
Right.
Just because the energy field in New York is so crazy, and I'm used to being around almost no one most of the week, you know?
Yeah, how many people live on Bowen Island?
I think the number's around 3,700 kind of thing. But I'm on my property. My energy field is me and my wife.
Yeah.
And then I'm on video calls and stuff. I'm in Vancouver one day a week, but basically
That's
it's
it.
a completely different vibe.
Yeah, I like that as a place to start because I think it really like provides a lot of context for your polarity as a human.
Yeah.
Like you have things that are just completely on the other side of the spectrum. You're not very. As I was digging through, I was trying to find ways where I could find patterns in how you were like approaching things, and you don't have a lot of monolithic thought when you break something down. You know what I'm saying? Not to get too Kanye on you, you know what I'm saying? But like you really try to go, okay, so this is one end of the spectrum. Let's go to the exact opposite, and then kind of work your way back in between to get the full spectrum.
That's a fair assessment. I am fairly extreme. I often start in extremes and find some middle ground over time. So that's actually an interesting observation.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, where that observation started was obviously you've done a ton of work on productivity and sleep and just human optimization and happiness and joy and fulfillment in general.
Yeah.
But that started, the whole polarity thing started when I saw that you were diagnosed with autoimmune disease, and yet you are this person who seemingly sleeps 8 hours, 9 hours, whatever it is,
right.
Now at this point. So you've clearly gone to both ends of the spectrum, and really understood what's best for you at that point, and what's best for you moving forward, and what's best for humans and your workforce moving forward. And it's really super interesting, especially your ideas around productivity. Part of me was, I want to say, scared, uncomfortable in sitting down and talking to you, because I was like, oh shit, Steve's going to come here, and I have this way of thinking, which is very, go, as a 20-year-old.
Yep.
So I'm very much on one side of the spectrum. I'm like, oh shit, Steve's going to come here. He's going to say a bunch of stuff. I know he's a super intelligent human being. He's going to make a ton of sense. He's going to change my way of thinking. And then I'm going to slow down. And then there's just going to be this voice in my head saying, Josh, you're falling off. And I was just like, ah.
Isn't that so interesting how it's so easy to feel like, man, I'm not doing enough. I got to, when I was your age, like when I was, I don't want to sound like an old man, but like when I was your age, I was trying to do every possible thing to sleep less. I was trying like biphasic sleep or polyphasic sleep cycles. Are you familiar with that at all?
I am.
The basics. The basics is people have experimented with this over time, but tried things where you sleep for 15 minutes every 2 hours instead of sleeping through the night.
Okay, that's different than what I know.
Or you can sleep, there's lots of different, or you sleep for an hour every 3 hours, but you never sleep an entire night in ways of, so I was trying that I was trying to hack that and figure out how I could sleep less. I think that when you're younger, like when you're in your 20s, it does feel like time is ripping by, that you're in some kind of race, and it's usually just with yourself, but
yes.
You do feel like you're in a race. What's really interesting is that, like, as I've gotten older, and I do think that that's when I worked myself so fucking hard, that I think that's when I got kidney disease. Like, I think I put myself under extreme pressure, and then, but now it's very interesting and I'm in my late 30s now, and it's interesting how time, the reality, like your perception of time really shifts. And like I can now think a couple years ahead and go, okay, I'm going to work towards that goal for the next couple years. And in 2 years, I'll be here. And that doesn't feel like a long period of time. Like I know that's going to kind of rip by, right?
Yeah.
And you get a lot more comfortable with setting 5-year goals or working on something. And also, then I've done all the research on why not sleeping and why doing all these things. We can talk about that later. But, I was doing all that same shit,
Yeah, I had a phase. Tracy knows. I had a phase where you ever heard of Ryan Leslie? You're a rap guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ryan Leslie went to Harvard, and he at one time he did this documentary, this Black Mozart documentary, and he talked about how he went on this dimaxin sleep schedule, which is essentially like. So I thought polyphasic was the same, but dimaxin is you need there's 4 stages of sleep, 5 stages of sleep.
Yeah.
Which one is it?
Well, they used to call it 5, and now they kind of refer to as 4 phases of sleep. But
REM 1, 2, 3, and deep.
It's REM. It just depends. REM is the 4th stage of sleep.
Oh.
So you kind of get deeper and deeper into sleep. Then there's REM sleep. Then you cycle back.
Okay.
But there's a first phase of sleep that there's also a phase of sleep as you're going into sleep that you have occurs too, but it's not really counted. So anyway,
okay. So tell me how wrong I am here. So what I thought when I did the research on it, when I said did the research, I mean go through Reddit streams, basically, and watch YouTube videos. It was you need one full in order to have like minimal cognitive function. You need to have one full 90-minute sleep, and then you can take 30-minute naps throughout the day. So like 12 to 1:30 sleep, and then you go 3 a.m. 30-minute, 9 a.m. 30-minute. 3 p.m., 30-minute, 9 p.m., 30-minute.
Oh, interesting.
That's what was
an interesting theory.
That was my thing. Didn't work.
It does not work.
Tried.
No, it does not work.
You're just gonna burn.
100%. It's interesting because that's actually based. So we have a circadian rhythm, and what's interesting is that for everybody, when we're sleeping earlier in the night, we're getting less REM sleep and more deep phase sleep. And deep phase sleep is physically restorative. So if you're anything you're doing, like repairing muscles, like clearing cancer, doing all sorts of things out of the body, deep phase sleep, that's really important.
Okay.
REM sleep, as you get closer to morning, the REM cycles get longer. So basically, your deep phase cycles get shorter, and your REM phase cycles get longer. And so in the morning, that's often why you have more dreams in the morning, and you remember them, and that sort of happens. And so if you're more of a creative, you'll often stay up later and then sleep later into the day, and you'll get more REM sleep than you will physically, like the deep wave sleep.
Right.
But through the whole day, that cycle exists. So if you're napping, like I've read some literature on napping. There's a great book by some, I think, Stanford researchers. It's called Take a Nap, Change Your Life, I think is the name of the book.
Yeah. Gotta love titles.
Pretty great title.
Yeah.
But they talk about, like, if you want to have creative naps, have them in the morning, late morning. If you want to have physically restorative naps, have them later in the afternoon. So maybe I've never heard of what you're describing, but maybe it's based on that research and trying to hack that in some way. Saying, like, if I get a half hour of sleep at different parts of the day, I get. But that's just not how sleep really works.
So I was like on this train for like a bit. What doesn't matter.
How long did you try to do this?
Like 3 months. Yeah, I crashed, burned.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sucked. Weird part of my life.
So why? Like, why did you do it?
I was in a situation where I was working for somebody, and I was in a job where I was not qualified, but was just being thrown in things that were way above. So then, if I had 6 hours or 8 hours, and it was elite level work, right. and essentially, I would need to do 6 hours of learning or training to be able. So it'd take me 16 hours to execute a 10-hour job, right? Yeah, that's not on them. That's on me. So as a person being thrown into that situation as a 22-year-old, you're like, hey, I got to figure out how to like populate and formulate Excel sheets to like do, just
that I've never done before,
or like figure out like, different ISOs on photos or whatever it may be. Like, should I have zero clue or education about? It's okay. I need to, there's just no way around. There's no way around. And I'm like, okay, I'll toss out social. It's no problem. Like I live with my girlfriend. It's cool. Right. And families, different parts of the world, not whatever, done. Right. So I was like, yeah, I can cut out. What's next? And then it's just, so the physical was like, okay, that's gone. And then we'll do sleep as the last thing. Yeah. And so I was trying to make it work. And, that's what you do when you're, young?
Yeah. I mean, you go through periods of that where you're stretched, like you're pushing yourself to the limit in terms of learning or doing things like that. I've had periods like where I took on projects that I had no idea what I was doing. I just said yes.
So why did you say yes?
Yeah, because you have to. That's life, right? Like life is about learning and about doing cool shit. So, I mean, but you're much more elastic when you're younger. Like you can bounce back from that stuff. I think it's prolonged periods. That's really a big problem, especially when you're young. But it also, it's so interesting that we have this relationship with time where, if I can just get a couple more hours in the day and I can get more done. But when you're sacrificing sleep for that, the quality of those hours is so much lower.
Drastically.
Right? And you're kind of getting into this funny cycle where you're getting less done, so you need more hours, so you sleep less, so you get less done because you need more hours, and it's just
down, and you make more errors. You have to go back and you have to backtrack.
And there's tons of research on this. This is like we were joking about the flat Earth thing. Like this is the whole thing. There's awesome research on this. It's decades old. It hasn't changed. It's not like it's up for debate. Like this is really clear stuff.
Okay, so sorry, I gotta ask you one question though. But first, you said earlier about the deep sleep. So like, I wear a Fitbit. I try to. It shows me when my deep sleep is. I don't know if that's accurate or not. Mm-hmm. I don't get a lot of it. I try to get. I'm an early riser.
Yep.
And so I'll try to get to bed at I get an alarm at like 8 o'clock. That's like, Joss, go to bed. And then like 9 o'clock rolls around, I'm in bed, right?
Yeah.
So when is the best time to when is the best time to get that deep sleep?
Well, so deep sleep happens throughout the night, but is the earlier cycles of your sleep.
Okay.
So if you're working out a lot or you're doing physical stuff, like sleeping earlier is more important than the late morning. So if you're going to bed earlier and getting up early, that's a better time to sleep. You're going to get more deep wave sleep than you're going to get REM sleep. But it is a 90-minute. So that thing you were trying is based. There is a 90-minute cycle roughly where you're going through these cycles of sleep. So you do get it throughout the night. It's just that if you think about the 90-minute cycle, like if you think about it as like a pie chart, the deep wave sleep starts to get shorter, smaller, and the REM sleep starts to get bigger as those 90-minute blocks go on. So if you have 4 90-minute cycles of sleep, the first couple you're going to have bigger portions of that 90-minute be deep wave, and as you get closer to the morning, the REM sleep increases.
Okay.
Yeah.
What made you go to this polyphasic sleep? What made you go?
Same stupid shit as you. Same thing is trying to get more time out of my day, because at the time I was recording music. I was playing in probably 2 different bands or producing some music. I was working. I was a grinder. I'm always been somebody who has a million things that I want to achieve and do. That's just how I'm wired. So just trying to do as many things in one day as possible.
And you justified it.
At the time I did. Yeah.
Not anymore.
Really, a lot of this for me is, man, if I could go back and tell myself to just calm down and take it a bit slower, I'd probably be physically healthier now, which I actually am pretty healthy these days.
You look great.
Really good care of myself.
Yeah.
And I've done a lot of research, and my wife does a lot of research, and we're really on top of this stuff. But I also just look back at how hard I was working myself, and I feel like, man, I could have moved actually faster if I was a little bit more strategic around that.
Yeah, we're pretty dumb as young males.
That's what happens.
It's fucking tough, bro. So, flat earthers around sleep. Totally right. I've looked a little bit into the work of Matthew Walker.
Yeah.
Shout out.
He's great.
To Joe Rogan, of course. He'll put me onto that. And
his podcast, his Joe Rogan interview is awesome.
Unreal. It's unreal. I love we try to emulate it. It was. And I used to always think, it's funny how you get confirmation bias, and I was looking at, why this polyphasic sleep is the best, and and it would pop up like, the 8 hours of sleep was derived from the Industrial Revolution, and we're not actually meant to sleep like this, and our ancestors had to get up and had to move, and we didn't have 8 hours of prolonged, and I was like, it's natural. It's not. When you say people are flat earthers around, sleep, productivity, why? Information is there. Information is clearly there. It's the same thing, around climate, but in terms of sleep, the information is right there, super accessible, right in front of our face, and we can drastically see the side effects.
Yeah.
There's a very direct cause-effect relationship. Why are we not aware or fixing this?
Well, what's interesting is that we've only been depriving ourselves of sleep as humans for about 100 years. Like, it only started about 100 years ago that we started rolling back our sleep. Before then, we actually slept lots. We're the only mammal on Earth that actually deprives itself of sleep on purpose. I think in many ways, like, we were designed hundreds of thousands of years ago. We have all of this programming. Our brains are a couple 100,000 years old, right? Like, we have a lot of programming that is not designed for today's world, right? And if you think about even just starting in the, I don't know exactly when faxes started coming, but those, like, the phone came, suddenly we could make phone calls and we could do deals without flying or traveling across the world to get to each other. And then we introduced fax, and suddenly we can sign a contract and I can fax it to you and we have a deal where literally if we were going to do a deal, you'd mail me a contract. It'd take a week to get to me or whatever, 2 weeks to get to me. I'd sign it, put it back in the mail, and 4 weeks later, we'd get on the phone and go, great, we have a deal. Let's start the project. And that's the pace of business. That's the pace of everything, right? But as we've introduced these different technologies, starting with fax, and then when email came, it was just completely game changer overnight in terms of pace. We've had this desire to keep, it's like we're setting a trap for ourselves and then we jump in the trap. And, humans are natural, like, we naturally want to evolve and move faster and do better and do bigger. Like, we're evolutionarily designed to win, and like everything and is, evolve. Like everything is, right? Like everything is, but we haven't really been intelligent about it. So.
Yeah, we're pretty stupid, generally speaking, when it comes to ourselves.
We're really bad at predicting what will be good and bad for us.
Right.
We're naturally not very good at seeing, looking at future scenarios. We're just naturally, we're designed, again, we're designed, we're not, like the way we look at, the issues with climate change we're seeing right now, and everyone's like, why can't we do something about it? Well, we're not really designed to care about the whole world. Right. Our brains were designed to care about our tribe and like a select group of people nearby us.
50 people around us. Yeah.
Like, frankly, the fact that in North America, like in America, they are, it's a multicultural country with all these different races and things. Like, this is the first time in human history that's existed. Like, this is an interesting experiment that we are running, and people are surprised that, there's insane racism and all this crazy stuff going on. But it's like, well, we're a few hundred years into an experiment over the evolution of a tribal humans, right? So these kind of things, like, we're not actually great. And then on our health and stuff, we're just not really great at predicting it. Like, we started smoking cigarettes, and we thought, that makes sense. Like, let's inhale cigarettes, smoke. And then all the research started coming out. Research started coming out in the 30s on cigarettes, and we ignored it. And then, John Hopkins, who's one of the very respected research hospital in the United States, they came out with very good research in 38. Smoking was like going like this in terms of trend and popularity. And even through the 50s, 60s, 70s, that's when research really became mainstream, and still we weren't really able to think it through.
No, and we still aren't. And it's funny how that we've seen that whole revolution go through, and like, I always think, like, my parents smoked, and I'm like,
parents did too.
It's 2019, people smoke. Like, that's ridiculous. So I always thought when I was a kid, I was like, oh, it's okay, like, all of our parents smoke, but by the time we're 20, 30, 40, there's no way, like, it'll die. It has to die.
Now people are smoking like little USB sticks.
They're smoking USB sticks. Welcome to 2019. Exactly.
But it's really interesting. Like, it's pretty bizarre.
I can't understand it. And now tobacco's still a huge problem. Smoking's still a huge problem. People die every day. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, whatever that number is. We can't seem to get over it. And now we have this new problem. You wrote an article recently that social media is the new tobacco, which I loved. And it was essentially, we're just this empty hole searching for meaning in dopamine and pleasure, and that just ties back into our primal brain. I think there's overlying themes in the research you've done in terms of we're still operating on a framework, on a hardware that is not built for what we have.
And we're being hacked repeatedly, right? Like, tobacco was hacking. The tobacco industry knew very well what they were doing pretty early on, right? And they continued to deny it. They built large lobbying bodies while doing research to make their cigarettes more addictive, right? And put other chemicals in them and make the tobacco, like make the besides nicotine, what else can we put in to enhance that addiction, right? But the same thing is happening in technology right now. So that's kind of why I wrote the article, is that the social media companies, they have large teams of attention engineers. They have large teams of people that their specific role is to make these products more addictive. So, we are being hacked. We didn't enter into an agreement with Facebook that said, yeah, what we'd like to do, Facebook, I'd like to sign up for your platform, and then I'd like to spend every waking moment on it. And now it's Instagram. Like, Facebook's kind of dying, but now it's Instagram or other things, company, right? Yeah. But that's not really what we signed up for. We signed up because we wanted to see our friends and see what was going on, right? Mm-hmm. But really quickly, you get caught into this loop, and you get addicted. I mean, they're using technology from the gambling industry. They're taking all sorts of everything they can take. Like, there's an interesting little story of a developer who used to work at Facebook told, he was at the start of his talk at South by Southwest. He said, on the first day you walked into Facebook, and I don't know if they do this anymore, they probably rolled this back a bit, but there's a big number on the wall, and it kind of looks like, in New York, there's a big number to show the federal debt. Right. It's like a number that's just going up and up and up. Yeah. And he said, like, there's a big number on the wall inside Facebook, and they point at that number and they say, that's the amount of minutes that people are spending on Facebook. Your only job is to make that number go up, right? So, like, this is the mindset of these companies, and then we wonder why we have this issue, right? So, in my mind, all of the things that I'm doing and thinking about, and there's lots of other great people thinking about this. Cal Newport is doing awesome work on this stuff. There's Tristan Harris is doing awesome work on this stuff. But is to say, like, with smoking, it took 40, 50 years to get regulations, to get awareness, to build things. With technology, we can't move that slow. Let's not go that slow. Let's actually just become aware as human beings and get smart and make some better choices.
So what's that going to take? We obviously don't have the luxury of 50 years.
No, I don't think we do. I mean, you look at what it's doing to society. You look at depression rates. 12 to 17-year-olds, depression rates are up 63% since 2013.
Since 2013.
Yeah, like just a few years, and those numbers are being directly correlated with technology use, and what, because it's depression based on isolation, based on loneliness. Like, there's some really serious societal issues happening here, and then you're seeing what's playing out in politics and divisiveness, and like people like Russia and other bad actors basically using that polarity as a weapon. So there's just really interesting things happening to society very, very quickly. And so, like, I'm hopeful in one way, in certain ways. Like, on the one hand, technology it's super addictive, but it's also not a substance that's going into our body. So it's actually breaking that cycle is quite a bit easier than nicotine or cocaine or heroin or something like that. While, like, they've done some testing, while social media has been shown to be about as addictive as cocaine, it's also not a substance that you have to wean off of. So it's you're mentally addicted, but you can wean off it quite quickly. And I'm just, like, I'm hopeful that it's interesting because they've created the technology to spread information much faster than we could in the 50s, 60s, right?
And now that information's false.
So, yeah, like 97% of that information is false. But the 3% that's real can also spread fast. So I'm also hopeful that these tools will also help get information out. Like, I think it would be great if there were social networks that did what they advertised to do, which was to connect people. Like, I don't think Facebook's trying to connect people. I think Facebook's job is to keep you on their platform as long as possible.
To generate ad revenue.
Yeah, you are the product. You're not the customer. You're the product.
Yeah, I deep dived on that a little while ago, and my whole, oh man, that'll get you.
It's pretty trippy.
Yeah, like, I'm being sold constantly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm literally working. So, okay, I spend 5 hours a day on Facebook. I'm working for someone else for 5 hours a day. Yeah. Whether that's data, whether that's views, whether that's ad revenue, whatever it is, that's creating dollars.
Which, again, is nothing we signed up for.
Not
we signed up because we wanted to see what our friends and family were doing. We wanted to keep up with what's going on in the world. Like, there are legitimate reasons to have platforms that connect us. People were very, very excited. Like, folks, like, there's a awesome, I don't know what he'd call himself, a media theorist or something like that. Or
that's a fun new term.
Something like that.
I like it.
But his name's Douglas Rushkoff, and he was actually the guy who coined the term viral media, like going viral. He wrote a book called Media Virus, like I don't know, maybe 20 years ago or something. Actually,
20 years ago.
Well, I don't know, like a long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah, probably 20 years ago. I would say, I think in the late 90s, but I could be totally wrong. But wow. Anyway, he was one of these guys who was super excited about the potential of the internet. The internet's going to connect all of us, and his whole thing with a media virus is this: oh, you can have a great idea and it can spread around the world instantly now. And he was super excited about that. Now he's writing books called Team Human, which is basically, hey, we need to really understand, like, and make choices that are good for humanity, and we need to stop evangelizing technology in the way we are. We need to make some hard choices. So a lot of people have come full circle, but there was a time when we should, like, when there was lots to be excited about in the internet, and I still think there is. I just think we need to be aware of what platforms are on and what their intention is. Like, I think it's the easiest thing you can do is look at any platform and say, am I paying anything to be here? Like, are they monetizing? Am I buying something from this person? Right? And if I'm not, and they're making lots of money, then
there's a disconnect.
Like, how are they making that money?
Yeah.
Like, are their intentions aligned with mine? Is what they're advertising aligned with their intentions? With what they're suggesting their intentions are. Like, Facebook is all saying this, I think I don't know what their platform slogan is, but it's something like connect the world or something big like that.
With, rainbows and butterflies. Yeah, no, for sure. There's so many places you could go off that. There's so many little tangents I could go, but what do you think the avenue, or what's the route, what's the game plan, what's the map in your mind as someone who's researched in this field of what is the way we get out of this? Where's the light? Because I'm not seeing it. Well,
it's actually really simple. Like, it's really simple. This is the work we're doing with Nature of Work with my new company. But it like, to put it as simply as possible is take control of your attention, take back your attention. Like, kind of think of it as being an attention activist or something like that. Like,
I like these terms. Yeah. I like these terms.
Every day we have a choice. Every morning we wake up, and every minute of that day we have a choice. What will we pay attention to?
Yeah.
And right now we have a lot of preconditioned habits and addictions and compulsions to reach for our phone and pay attention to some bullshit. Right? And pay attention to stuff that isn't making our lives better, is actually depressing us and making us feel isolated, is not really helping us in any way, is making lots of other people rich. Right? So we have a choice. It's as simple as, hey, like, just take back control of your attention. That's the first step. And it starts with what does the first, like, half hour of your day look like? Can you make it half hour without your phone? Can you remove social media apps from your phone entirely? Can you set new habits with yourself so that even if you do want to do some connection on, let's say, Instagram and check in with friends or something like that, can you do that in set periods of the day rather than every time you get 5 minutes? That's the first thing you're doing. So I think the two things that we're seeing is that our attention is being taken from us, is being manipulated away from us. It's not being taken because we're giving it away, but it's being manipulated away from us. And the second thing is that because we're spending so much of our mental energy on technology, we're not actually getting any time to think. And so by creating space, by actually creating space in your time in your day, you start to reflect on what's important to you. You start processing your ideas and your thoughts. You start having new ideas. Things start happening.
You start getting light bulb moments.
100%. Things just start happening in a different way when you start freeing up your mind to do what it was designed to do.
Process things.
Yeah, to think deeply.
Deep work, to reference that again. Lots of powerful things there. I want a perfect segue there into Nature of Work and building habits. So, like, for instance, if I was to get a little bit selfish here and say, okay, how should me as an average person or someone that's consumed in this world, like utterly consumed, we do the podcast as one thing, we have 100 different endeavors, all of which are pushed out over social media.
Right.
You're
leveraging all the channels.
And we're leveraging everything. Yeah. Our attention is there. We're trying to get some, and there's no, we're not printing out flyers, we have to go on this way. That's how it works. This is how it works. So
you're not on the corner.
No, 100%.
Flipping flyers. Okay.
And I wish I was. I would much rather that. If we lived in a world where there's no social media, I wish I was born in the 80s and the 90s and the 60s.
A true extrovert.
Like, hey, here's my CD, or here's my flyer, come to my
Yeah.
event, or like, you know, doing the guerrilla marketing shit. That's amazing. But we're so immersed in this. So for a company and a person like myself, where it's like, hey, I quote unquote need to leverage this shit, how do I disconnect? Because all the time I'm like, I don't want to be on Facebook. I get really scared with the whole data thing.
Yeah, totally.
I don't want to be on Facebook. You know, I want to get away from that. I don't find value in it. All my family members, I have their phone numbers. I'm good. I know where they are, and if they're in town, they'll call me and we'll connect because I have that, you know, relationship. I don't need that. I don't want that. But yet I need to push this shit out here. I don't want that Instagram. But yet I need to push this shit out here. So I'm trapped.
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, if you're using these things as tools, so it's interesting because with Nature of Work, we're going to be doing a lot of digital marketing. And I talked to one of my coaches about this because I felt a little bit thrown off about the whole idea. I'm like, well, our whole thing is we want people to remove themselves from social media, yet the way to reach them is through social media. So does that make sense? And she's really funny. She's kind of, this is one of my more trippy spiritual coaches, but
I like
she
Bowen Island types.
No. But California types.
California types. Yeah, I like it.
And she said to me, she's like, oh, that's no problem. She's like, that's what Jesus does. Jesus will make you drink so that you realize drinking is bad, or they'll trip you and he'll make you trip. And like, she was kind of like, but anyway, that's kind of a funny story. But the thing for me is like, I want people to find out about us, to access and to gain control over their attention in this and whatnot, and then to get off these things. But I also think that using these things as tools, like when you use technology as a tool, it's very different than when you're using it mindlessly, when you're using it without intention. Like, I think a lot of what I think about and try to help people with, and what we think about with Nature of Work, is around attention and intention. So why are you on Instagram right now? Like, is there a good reason for that? And obviously it's an important marketing channel. It's an important way to get ideas out. And if you're spreading good energy and spreading good information and positive things, then you're doing a service. You know, you're offering a service, and I think there's value in that. So I think that's like,
it's a net benefit.
That's really good. Yeah. Okay. One thing I did, like I killed my Facebook account, I think a year or maybe 2 years ago now. Completely killed it. And but now, because we're setting up some ad campaigns and stuff like that, like I need to have an account. So I created an account, but it has no friends, right? It has no photo,
it's a ghost.
The privacy settings are completely locked down. But it's a way for me to access in there and do what I need to do. I have Instagram, like I'm on it a bit. Again, I don't think it's kind of like drugs. Like anything in moderation is it can be okay.
Right.
It's when it's compulsive behavior and when it's interrupting other better behavior that it's a real problem, right? Like if I spend 5 minutes a day on Instagram, I don't think that's really a problem. Besides the potential risk of me feeling bad about my life because everybody's like filtered life looks really, really great. Besides that factor, if I've got myself in check in that way, then what is 5 minutes a day is not a big deal.
Yeah, totally.
When a lot of people are spending 2-3 hours a day.
Teens, 5, 6.
Yeah, like teens are spending an average of 11 hours a day on their phone.
11 hours.
Yeah, so that's an intense amount of time. So I just think it's a matter of it's not saying, hey, we need to throw all our phones in the ocean and walk into the woods, right?
Because that's where I would go.
I would be into that. I'm pretty into that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's a reality. We are in an era where we are making podcasts and doing all sorts of stuff. We are doing technology. We're on technology, and that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, it's okay. And I really like that intention versus, what would you say, attention versus intention?
Well, no, like I just focus on your, like how you're spending your attention and what is your intention with using any of these
attention
things.
versus intention. No, that's amazing. But lines get blurred.
Yeah, of course they do, yeah.
Like, dude, so we
how
post
easy
every
is
Monday.
It to go down a wormhole?
Oh, dude. So literally, I will pop up and we post every Monday. Our podcast drops every Monday. So I'll go up, boom, stories, posts, this channel, that channel, self-hire brand, personal brand, da-da-da-da. I'll interlace them, tag, da-da-da-da. And like, you know how easy it is for me to spend 2 hours on that or an hour and a half on that? It could be done in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden it's just like, and then you just, I get grabbed. Now I'm in the explore page. Why am I in the explore page?
Think about how addictive these tools are. It's that easy to fall into a trap.
Yeah.
YouTube is the same. All these tools are the same. They're unbelievable at, you go in and for one thing and you end up doing 10 other things. It's really wild.
And you forget why you're there in the first place.
Yeah. And what actually ends up happening too is if our brains are we're in a conditional state of multitasking, that our brains are actually less able to basically prioritize. So what starts to happen is that we're less able to prioritize our time and our energy. So these things get easier. It's like, again, it's kind of a downward spiral sort of thing, where you. I mean, I have the same thing in my email all the time, where I go in looking for some piece of information, but then I end up responding to 5 emails and doing a bunch of stuff. Like, our brains kind of have been conditioned to, hey, there's a bunch of things I could do here.
Yeah, press this
like,
button.
Like what, how many things can I do in 5 minutes kind of thing.
Yeah, that microwave syndrome.
So it is breaking those cycles and building new habits and new routines around that stuff.
So tough.
Yeah.
And especially when you think you're on there being productive.
Yeah, totally.
Like, and so I try to take steps like, don't, like, if you DM me and I actually want to talk to you, like, I will give you my cell phone number right off the bat.
100%.
Like,
that's
I just
a great idea.
don't want to be there.
I've gotten into that too, where it's like, you'll spend 5 emails trying to line up a 10-minute phone call sometimes or something like that. So now I put my cell phone number, say, call me anytime between 2 and 4, Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
Like, call me anytime.
Yeah, I'll pick up.
It's all good. And if I miss you, I'll call you right back.
Well, remember how that used to work?
And honestly, you get a lot more done. And the other thing that's really interesting is that we sort of think that, that social media or that texting brings us social gratification, but it actually doesn't. It like, we are as humans, we require social interaction to really to stay alive. There are very few people, besides like some extreme Buddhist monks and things like that, who can be in isolation for many years. Like, you think about jail, the worst place to be in a jail is in isolation.
Yeah, in the hole. Yeah.
And that's because we are psychologically not prepared for that. We're not psychologically designed for that. We need social interaction. And there's a big difference between you and I sitting face to face and interacting versus texting. Completely different, right? And it's kind of a scale, right? Like, we could talk face to face, best case scenario. What happens when we're talking face to face is like there's subtle cues that we're not necessarily consciously aware of, but that are happening. Like, I'm getting social cues from you. Your pupils are dilating. I'm not like actually paying attention, but these things are happening.
Totally, you pay, yeah.
Right? Like, we can tell each other. There's like pheromones and hormones and things in the air. There's a body temperature situation. Yeah. There's energy. There's all sorts of things happening here that give us social connection. That's really important. Like, it affects our immune system. It affects all sorts of health conditions. It affects our psychological and physical well-being in a major way. So what's interesting is that this is very important, right? And we can replace that with video chat, which is close. We can at least see each other's face. We get some verbal cues. We can see intonation of the voice, but I still can't see. There's a bunch of subtle cues I can no longer see.
Or
right?
even when you walk in a room.
Right?
Even when you walk in a room, it affects your immune system.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
What? You just went way over my head.
Well, there's some people will say that social isolation is the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Like, that's kind of a dumbed down summary of some research that's been done. Right. But this is the kind of idea that if you're really socially isolated, and there's lots of research showing that for men, especially as they start to age, social isolation is one of the key factors in terms of how long they'll live, whether they'll contract disease or cancers and things like that. Like, it's a huge deal. So what you see in society right now is that, we move to video, then we move to chat, and you think about chat, like, chat has almost no social interaction value, like the actual physiological social interaction we need. But we replace a lot of the time we'd spend with humans on our phones, on social media, on chat. And I always think, like, the way I think about chat is that a single emoji can have so much emotion.
I was just going to say that,
in a chat channel. But think about how barren of an environment it is when a little face, like a little cartoon face, can mean so much. Or a little bear or whatever the fuck.
Wow.
They can mean so much, and that's how empty that environment is.
Right.
Right? So I just think that what we need to be really aware of, too, as we think about how we're spending our time on digital is like, is that replacing time we might actually spend going out with a friend or even on a phone call with somebody we love or somebody close to us, instead of trying to maintain loose relationships with dozens or hundreds of random people that we don't really see or care about, that don't know anything about us.
Yeah.
Like, that I mean, when I talked about the issue around depression and isolation, that's what's going on right now.
Right. It's that. Yeah. Just to go back to that emoji thing, like, how barren of an environment is it that one emoji could mean so many different things, and then how basic that
it could mean anything.
It could mean anything. Like, how many different types of smiles are there?
Yeah.
there's like 10 different types of smiles, and then each different type of smile has a different little connotation, and you're like, oh, did he mean this? Did she mean this? Like if you're like first seeing a girl and she hits you with a certain type of smile, like or you don't know.
Totally.
It's like
there's
a
a
big
whole
deal.
code to it.
There's a huge code.
Can you imagine though in this environment if I had little faces, like little emojis, and I'm holding it up to tell you how I'm feeling, how ridiculous that would seem?
It would just seem barbaric. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Cool. So, so I laugh, right? I laugh when I because I found you through Business Vancouver 40 under 40. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Also one of the top growing companies in BC, fastest growing company in BC. Congratulations. Brightweb is amazing.
Thank you.
Nature work is unreal. How the hell does quick sidebar Ollie? Is that it?
Ollie, yeah.
How does alcohol delivery tie into that?
I look anything?
At Brightweb, nature work, booze.
Yeah, 100%.
What?
It's interesting because I don't really drink. I drink a little bit here and there.
All right.
But these days I'm like quite pleased being pretty much completely sober.
Yeah.
But so Ollie came about because a very good friend of mine. So one of the guys in my peer group, I'm in a peer group with a group of guys, other CEOs, and
okay, a little light flex.
Oh, he's dope. The group is dope. The group is dope, and honestly, anyone can be in a peer group and should try and find a peer group. It's honestly been a huge learning curve for me, like being around these guys.
Yeah.
And we've really turned into a support group for each other, and we learn a lot about each other personally and all that stuff. It's awesome.
Nice.
I didn't even think that was a flex, but that's cool.
I was just trying to put you on the spot.
But yeah, one of the guys in that group, he's been in the liquor business for like 20 years, but he's also one of the best dudes I've ever met. And just an outstanding entrepreneur. He owns a bunch of restaurants. He owns all sorts of things in town. He owns a distribution company.
Oh, wow.
He owned Postmark. Postmark Brewing. He owns the wine on tap that you see in all the restaurants. That's his company.
Oh,
like, the dude is all over the place.
These are some serious CEOs.
Yeah,
here.
He's hooked up. Yeah, and he's done very well. He basically has been in the craft liquor industry now for a bunch of years. He came to me and said, "Look, there's this huge problem in the craft liquor industry. There's all these awesome young breweries, all these young small companies. They're a complete shit show trying to distribute and sell their booze. If you're a cold beer and wine store right now, like the problem, I think about, I always use, what's the brewery or the cold beer and wine store up on Main Street? Brewery Creek.
Sure.
Brewery Creek is a small cold beer and wine store, do pretty high volume, but they have a guy in there. He works full time making 80 orders a week from 80 different people now. So the whole industry has changed because craft beer has become so popular, craft liquor. So it's just kind of like, it's a huge problem to solve, and it's all these small companies, and they're trying to do something like it's all locally based stuff. It's basically replacing these like Labatt and Corona and Heineken and all these like massive conglomerate brands with local. So on the one hand, it's booze, which is not something I really care about promoting necessarily. Like it's part of society, and I think everything in moderation is fine.
Totally, yeah.
But what got me interested is the fact that this is actually like a ton of craft small businesses. This is going to really help connect them. So we're building a platform to help connect them and the bars and restaurants and cold beer and wine. So it is definitely a bit tangential from everything else I do, which has a really clear social impact frame to it.
Yeah, but it's still based in social impact.
But it does. Like I had to get my head around that. Like
sure.
What's interesting is I actually really thought that through. When he came to me, I said I wanted to do something with him because I just think he's such a sharp guy.
Sure.
And the other founders that are involved are also just super sharp, really successful guys. So I thought, man, this is going to be a neat project. I'm going to learn a lot. And then I thought through and I said, like, I know for myself that if something doesn't have a social impact component, that I will lose interest. Like I learned pretty early on that I while I enjoy money, I don't do things for money. And if I do them purely for money, I just drop off. Like I just lose interest very quick. And I think I'm going to be like, I'm like, oh, just 2 years and I'll make a bunch of money. I make it a couple months and I fall out of it. Yeah. So I really had to think that through because that was key for me.
Yeah, it was really interesting, man. That threw me a complete curveball.
Yeah, it's totally different.
Yeah, and that it speaks to your polarity, and I understand that there's commonalities there, and that's beautiful. And microbreweries and these different things are actually amazing. I think that long-term goals for me, I want to own people, or not own people.
Getting
pause,
weird.
pause. Edit that one.
Yeah.
Own.
Make a mark.
Oh yeah, yeah, please. Own places where people congregate physically, because I think it's going to make a huge comeback.
100%.
Because we've gone so far down a different route, and I think that we are still super depressed. I think we're gonna get more depressed. I think it's gonna get worse.
Yeah.
Like I try to be an optimist, but in this specific avenue, I think that things are going to get worse for right now. And our technology, again, is adapting too quickly, and we're not adapting to it. It's controlling us in various ways. And so I think that long term, the way to find fulfillment is, because I love business, I love impact, and I love money too. But
Right.
like you said, it'll die off. You know, if there's little things like, oh, I'll make it quick this, or this business can be good for this time, like it's just not good. I'm just
You have
sorry.
to know what motivates you. And some people,
Exactly.
they're purely motivated by money, and that's fine. Like, it's just really what's good for you, right?
Exactly. So I'm trying to situate myself and think long term, and okay, what's really gonna light a fire for a long time, right? Because I don't like to waste time. I hate pivoting. Like I pivot a lot, but I hate pivoting because I'm like, oh, fuck, that's lost ground.
At your age, you should pivot a lot. It's all good.
Yeah,
Try things out. But I think what you should be thinking about over the next 10 years of your life is, what is my personal purpose? What actually drives me? And do that work to get down further and further down into that. Like, I've gone through a few iterations of what is, like, every good business goes through a process where they figure out what is our purpose, like what's the purpose of this company. But as individuals, we don't really do that much. Like, certain individuals do, but I think not enough people do. I think if people did that more, we'd have a lot more people doing important, like, impactful things in this world to move the world in a better place, as opposed to doing things purely as a way to make income that they're not actually passionate about. Like, even just, I think there'd just even be more people doing what they're passionate about versus just what gets them paid.
Yeah, we're moving. I hope that we're moving away from that traditional model, and I think
we are in some ways, for sure.
There's a lot of interesting things. Like, it's a crazy time in terms of automation. I think that we're going to be going through a purpose crisis in, I don't know, 10, 15 years. I think it's
with automation.
With automation, essentially, and I don't think that people are going to. Yeah, people will lose jobs. Jobs will change. Markets will pivot. Things will move. However, people are still we'll find a way to be okay, especially in the Western world. Like, governments and companies will find a way to make sure that people have, money, and will be able to live a life that is, somewhat sustained financially. But I think that, hopefully, fingers crossed. Yeah. But I think that even if they do, if things like, I don't know if you're familiar with Andrew Yang, who he's running for President of America, President of the United States, 2020.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've watched a bit of his stuff.
Freedom Dividend. Yeah, I think that's what it's called.
There's lots of people talking about this idea.
It's amazing, and it's really cool. But even with that, okay, so now you'll put money in people. The concept is you get $1,000 a month, just essentially because automation is making our economy more productive. And then those spillovers come onto you as a citizen. But so you'll have money, but you won't have that time consumption. So if you don't have that time consumption, you'll have time to think. You'll have time to rethink your purpose. And I think that we're going to have a huge societal shift around purpose. Like, what the hell are we going to do? What's important? What do I care about? It's not my job anymore. What happens if it's not my job? What do I do if that's not the main driver in my life? I don't freaking know. Yeah. That's a huge crisis. And I don't know how we're going to get over that one. That's the one that scares me.
That's interesting. So that's what you think is the worst, like the biggest issue in that scenario is people having to come to terms with finding purpose.
I don't know if it's the biggest. It's one that stands out. It's the biggest. I wouldn't say it's the biggest. It just screams at me. Yeah. It just screams at me louder than anything else.
That is interesting, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know how we're going to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think similarly, when I think about, people are talking about basic income is basically like, he's calling it a freedom dividend, and they're doing trials in some spots in Europe right now and thinking about that kind of stuff. What's interesting to me is that it's like, okay, we can give people some money, but what does that actually mean? Like, and it's the same kind of thing you're saying, right? It's like, it doesn't actually fulfill you. What does $1,000 buy you? Very little. Like, it doesn't pay your rent in most places. But besides that, like, how does that, people, we're designed to, we are happy when we feel like people rely on us, when we have not necessarily a job that pays us, but a job. Like we have something to do that's important to us. Like most animals do. Dogs feel the same way. Like they're happiest when they're working, when there's meaning to what they do, when they get up and they have a hard problem to solve. Like there's lots of research showing that that's when the brain is happiest, when it has hard problems to solve. So I think that is really interesting that if people, I mean, already there's so much work though that doesn't fulfill that, you know, that isn't challenging, isn't meaningful, is kind of routine work. So replacing all that work to me, like doesn't really, it offsets money. So that's an issue we got to solve. So maybe that some of that will solve that, right?
Yeah. So you said right now, like this is an issue that already exists. Insert social media, insert substance abuse.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
yeah. Well, there's always been substance abuse, but there's like, we're just in a funny time when busyness is what people strive for, but there was eras where busyness was like was a synonym for unhappiness. Right. Like when if you didn't have time to think and to wander and have big thoughts and stuff like that, you were living a really bad life. And now even some of the most successful people still remain exceptionally busy, even though they don't have to.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting condition.
It's very interesting, and it's interesting because you talk so much about creating space in life and work and in that balance and interpersonal relationships. I want to double back a little bit here because I'm a little stuck. You said that as a young person, you should focus on what, I'm totally twisting your words, lights your fire, right? So everyone says find your passion. Like, yeah, it's a little cliche, but like what truly motivates you on a deep level and will motivate you for a long time? What's part of your character that can play into a larger narrative? In turn, you can enter a workforce that fulfills that, or find an occupation or whatever it is that fulfills that, and will burn it for a long time, right?
I don't think that's the only thing you should do, but yeah, okay. I think that's part of it.
Part of it, right?
Yeah.
So what did young Steve Rio think?
What do you mean? What did I think about what?
When you were 16, 19.
I thought I was going to be a rock star.
Sweet.
Like I thought I was going to be a musician.
Right.
I didn't really care necessarily about being a rock star, but I cared a lot about music. I loved music.
You still do?
Yeah, no, I still do. And there will be a time in my life when I make a lot more music. But shout out, you can check out my solo album on Spotify. Plug. I'm gonna get my streams up.
Let's go.
I'm just kidding. I did that album like a decade ago, but more than a decade ago. But yeah, I thought I was gonna make music for the rest of my life. Like I picked up a guitar when I was 12 years old. There's actually photos of me as a little kid with toy guitars rocking out on them. But I picked up a guitar at 12 years old and really didn't put it down again until I was 19, 20. Like there's in my house when I was growing up as a teenager, I'd come home and I'd strap my guitar and I just walk around the house with it all day long.
Yeah.
Like all I really did was make music. Right. I was organizing when I was in grade 8. We were renting out Dunbar Community Center and organizing shows with other bands and I was organizing my own shows and putting out flyers, talking about flyers, doing all that. Like I was the CEO of my bands before I was the CEO of anything else, right? So, but music was always my thing. And then when I was when I was about 20 or so, I got a copy of Photoshop from a friend.
Oh, big times.
A bootleg copy of Photoshop, and I was going to because I wanted to make my own album covers. Right. And I started messing around with, well, actually I hadn't started messing around with Photoshop. I was playing a show in Blunt Brothers, which used to be a pot cafe down on Hastings.
Sweet.
Like way before any of this stuff was legal. But it was like a big public thing, but and I was playing a show there, and I was hanging out with the owners after in their office, and I was looking at a copy of High Times, and I saw their ad in High Times magazine. And I've always been somebody who can sell stuff before I can do it, kind of thing. Like I'm pretty good at that. And I looked at the ad and I thought, this is pretty ugly. Like the design was terrible.
Right.
And I said, how much did you pay for this? And I think I could probably do this better for you. And so I said, what did you pay for it? And I basically said, well, I'll do it for half of that, which I think was a couple $1,000 or $1,000. And I was 20 years old or something. And I was
big money.
I was like, whoa, they said yes to that.
Yeah.
But I actually hadn't opened Photoshop yet. So I then went home and opened Photoshop and started learning how to use it and playing around with it and did my first full page ad for like a major national magazine.
Unreal.
And started doing that. So I started getting into design and having fun with that. And then somebody said, "Oh, can you code a website?" This was like early days of HTML, and somebody said, "Could you code us a website?" And I was like, "Yeah, for sure, totally can."
Got you.
And then I went home and I started learning how to code, and figuring out how to code HTML. Then there was a few years where I was making music. I had a home studio, and this was great for me because I was able to. I only had a couple real jobs, and they didn't last long. But like I was able to quit. I was working at TD Bank at the time, and I was able to quit that and start. Yeah, I was a teller for like 3 months.
Oh my gosh.
I was great at talking to people and not great at like keeping track of all the details.
Their money.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Basically, I was able to work from home. I had a lot more flexibility. I was suddenly able to charge a bit more. I was starting to make some money, like not real money, but like a little money. And then there was like, and I was still making music, but then there was starting to be a transition. Like I got more and more into design and digital and coding and stuff like that. It started to be like a really fun hobby. Like it was really exciting to me and creative and all this stuff. And at the same time, I was going through this period where it's like, well, the kind of music I really like to make isn't really popular music. So it's never going to be...
This was like punk rock.
Well, that was one of the bands I was in. I was in like a punk metal band.
Yeah.
I was also doing a bunch of kind of weird jazz stuff. I was doing pretty avant-garde music.
Sick.
Like a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
I also produced a bunch of rap and stuff like that, but I was like, I'm never going to rap because I'm white and I'm just not, I was just never that into that. Like I was never into that idea.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that's probably if I could have got my head around that, I probably would have been like a white rapper.
Sweet.
Luckily, I never did that.
So
Thank God.
What are you talking about? I'm actually disappointed.
No, I think that's all right. But at the time, it didn't feel right. And so anyway, there was just a transition point around my 20s where I was like, you know what? I think music is not going to be my career. It's not what I'm passionate about. I was starting to make a bit more money doing the other stuff, and it was like a natural kind of wind down period.
Sure. And then all of a sudden, you're like, hey, you know what? I should bike down to Tijuana. That's what I should do. That makes sense now, right? Is that where in the timeline is that?
You dug that up. Yeah. So the full story of that real quick. I'll tell this short version, but
tell it long, man. I want to hear.
Okay. So this is around 2006, 2007. YouTube had just come out. YouTube came out in 2006 or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, stepping back a little bit before that, I had also, during that time, gotten involved. I was hanging around the Blunt Brothers guys a lot and around that scene a lot. There's some stuff going on down there that wasn't exactly like above bar.
Yep.
I got into some stuff and I basically ended up in a bunch of debt. Like I maxed out some credit cards. I took a loan out of the bank and I basically gave that money to someone to try and do something, and that went bad.
Didn't go.
So I ended up in a bunch of debt through my early 20s, and like 40, 50 grand worth of debt.
Oh shit!
Yeah, and it was mostly credit card debt, so it was like really high interest. Yeah, like really bad, and also like I didn't tell anybody about it because I was really embarrassed, and it was like just a dumb move, and it just happened fast, and. So my parents didn't know. Nobody knew. My girlfriend, I don't even think, knew at the time. Like, it was a real secret for me. So what was interesting is I was working my ass off, doing all this, starting to do web and design and stuff, making okay money, but, like, just paying down interest payments every month, like a couple grand. Like, I was paying way more on my credit card than I was in rent. Like, it was kind of crazy. And so that went on for a few years, and I kind of reached a point where, like, just had to be a breaking point. Something had to change.
Something had to go,
right?
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I was going through basically a messy breakup, and I was feeling like it was interesting. I was with a woman who was a lovely person and taught me a lot about life. She was a bit older than me, but also was messing with my head. Like I was in a weird space mentally. I didn't have a lot of friends anymore. I was not feeling confident in myself. And I was also in all this debt. So everything was just I felt like things were sort of falling apart. Mm-hmm. So I ended up breaking up with her, moving out. We were living together. I moved back into my parents' basement for a bit. And I was just really depressed. And I didn't really have friends. And I felt like, man, I got to go somewhere. I got to get out. Like, I have no money. Like, how am I going to go anywhere? Mm-hmm. I was literally like just tapping down like a couple grand a month in interest payments just to keep my credit card from fully shutting down kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so it was, I don't even know where the idea came from. I had never biked anywhere in my whole life. Like I had a mountain bike that I'd had since high school. I know my dad had done some like bike to Osoyoos a couple times. So I knew I guess somehow in my head I knew you could bike places, you know? I think, and I was reading some trippy book, like maybe On the Road or like a Jack Kerouac book or some classic sort of traveler hippie book.
Sweet.
And I guess I put those two things together and I got this idea, you know what? I'm going to bike down the coast.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm just going to do that.
On my mountain bike.
On a mountain bike. Like I didn't even know that was a crazy bike to use.
Because you didn't know anything about bikes.
Like I didn't know anything about bikes. Honestly,
you're like, this is a bike.
Yeah, like I told my folks, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go on this bike trip and I'm going to leave in 2 weeks. And my dad looks at me like I'm totally insane. He's like, well, have you worked out? Have you done any bike? And I'm like, well, I jog a bit and stuff like that. It's totally different muscle groups, but I think, yeah, I'm jogging. I'm going to be great.
Cardio.
Yeah, I do some cardio. And so he's like, well, you should like do some bike rides and test this out and get your leg muscles up. You're going to die out there kind of thing. Yeah. He's like, he showed me how to change a tire on a bike. I'd never done that. Like I'd never done anything. I had never maintained a bike at all. Right.
Well, shout out to Dad first off.
Yeah. Shout out to Dad for giving me some life tips and telling me I was an idiot. But not enough to make me stop. But he honestly, he showed me how to put the bags on your bike, like, and rig your bike up. And then partway through that, like I was actually just planning to tent all the way down. I was going to have a tent on the back of the thing. I rigged up my bike. It weighed like 100 pounds with all the stuff I had on it.
So tough.
It was crazy.
That's so tough.
It was crazy.
100 pounds.
It was I ditched a bunch of stuff pretty quick and I got it down to about 75 pounds. But
still outrageous.
It was totally outrageous. But then partway through that, my friend was like, hey, there's this new thing called couchsurfing.com. And I don't know if you've ever heard of couchsurfing.
Yeah, a little bit.
But it was like this early social network where people put their place online and you could stay with people. You could create a profile and it's like Airbnb without the money.
Yeah.
It's like, let me crash with you kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'll see you. But it was super early. It was really big in Europe, but barely in North America. So I found somebody in San Francisco, I think, and Portland, and
nice.
and like a couple key cities along the way, but there's like dozens of stops in between there. At the time, MySpace was still a thing. Like I'm dating myself here, but like MySpace was the social network at the time. I was playing in bands, and I was kind of and there was all these tools you could spam people with as a band if you were on tour. So I found this tool, and I was like, hey, what if I reach out to people in each of these cities? I'll find a zip code in each of these cities, and I'll email a ton of people in each of these cities, and I'll ask them if I can come stay at their house.
Yeah.
And YouTube was really early, so I put a video of me online going, sweet. Hey, I'm Steve. I'm not crazy.
Way.
Like I was like going on this spiritual journey, and I said a bunch of stuff. And I was like, I'm going on this trip, and I'm looking to connect with people, and I need places to stay. So I put a video on, and then I used this tool that was designed for bands to tell people about their tour dates kind of thing.
Sweet.
And I emailed a whole bunch of people. I basically set it on auto, like it like spanned a bunch of people in each city in all these zip codes overnight. Yeah. And I woke up the next morning and I had like 500 emails back from people, like all these random people. And people were just like, yeah, for sure. Like, come crash in my house.
Back when you could hack the internet.
It was so random.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting for me because like leading up to that, I think part of me in my mind was, I'm just going to bike until I die. Like, I'm just going to go and I'm never coming back sort of thing. Like, I wasn't actually suicidal,
right.
But I was in a dark place and I didn't really, it was a pretty dark thing. Like, I just needed to get out, it wasn't exciting that I was going on this bike trip necessarily. Yeah. But I got all these emails and it was like a complete 180. And I was like, holy crap. Like, look at all of these people that want to welcome me into their home. And it was just a totally different trip. So I basically like had a couple days left before I was going to leave. So I started emailing people back and going through all these profiles and trying to weed out like, who should I stay with? And, just whatever, just randomly pick people and line up people, say, I'm coming on this date. Will you be there? Can I stay there? And I made a spreadsheet and I kept track of everybody. And then I got on my bike and took off. Like, I remember, I will never forget the day I left my house and was going to bike to my sister's place in Deming, Washington. And that first day, man, my legs were like so sore. They got to the point where they were basically completely seized up. My thigh muscles were completely seized up. Like I was lying on the side of the road. My muscles felt like I was deadlifting 1,000 pounds. Like that's the amount of pressure they felt because I could barely move them. It was crazy. The first day was crazy. And then I got to my sister's house. I ditched a bunch of stuff. I was like, I can't carry all this stuff. Yeah. Then the next day I went from her house to Seattle. And the first couple sets of my trip, I hadn't really figured out the distances. My dad had told me, like, you really got to work out the distances, really think about your route. And I was not listening.
Yeah, of course.
So I try to go from there to Seattle, which is way too far. I can't remember the distance of that, but it's a couple 100 kilometers. And like by the end of my trip, I was doing 150 kilometers in a day.
That's pretty good.
By the end of my trip. But like my legs barely fit my jeans. Like I was like a different person within a few weeks. Like I was working every day.
Yeah.
So the first couple of days were crazy. And some dude in a pickup truck picked me up, and he told me that a crow had told him he was going to pick somebody up today. He was a total crazy person. But like I had all these wild adventures. Like I met different people in every place, and it was just a totally unreal trip. And I didn't drink on that trip. I was basically eating super clean. I was meditating every day. I completely transformed the way I thought about life on that trip. I thought I had a lot of time to think. I mean, talk about, creating space and stuff like that. Like I would get on my bike in the morning and I would be alone for 8 hours biking, and I'm sweating, and you got like all sorts of good energy. Like your body is really happy. It's getting a sweat on and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just alone with my thoughts. At the time, I had a little MP3 player with like 8 albums on it, So
what albums? Sorry, pause.
I don't remember.
No?
There's definitely like 1 or 2 rap albums, but I'm trying to remember which ones it would have been at that time.
What year are we at?
2007. I don't remember, to be honest. The only album I do remember was on there was Citizen Cope, who was like this kind of, I don't know how to describe him. But anyway.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, I just had a tremendous amount of time to think and to think things through and to figure out what I was going to do.
Yeah. And then when you got to Tijuana.
And it was like a transformational trip. I biked right down the coastline, which is unbelievably beautiful. Like the whole time I was planning this trip, it never occurred to me that I was going down one of the most beautiful coastlines in the world.
Yeah.
Like all those kind of things.
Yeah, you just don't think about it.
And the whole trip, like it just magically happened and worked. And it rained, I think, one day of the whole trip. And this was in April, May kind of timing. So
yeah,
like this is a time when the Oregon coast should be foggy and raining almost every day.
Shitty, yeah.
I had one day, I got hit by a car once, but but not super bad.
The trip went perfect. Something got hit by a car.
I got hit by a car one day, but like and it was a minor thing, and I didn't get wiped out. And other than that, like I popped a couple tires, but I was able to fix them on the road. Like other than that, really nothing bad happened. I stayed with strangers in every single city.
You were good.
In some cities, like I for a while, I was like, I'm going to pick people who kind of look like moms and like people who are going to help me do laundry and like maybe cook me food, and I have no money. So I picked people that looked really safe and would take care of me. And then a few of them, I just thought, man, that's a really random dude to have written me back. Like I wrote a really heartfelt email, and this weird trucker dude writes me back from Lincoln City, Oregon. And a picture of him is like in his black overalls with his big rig behind him. Yeah. And he writes me back. I'm like, I'm going to stay with that guy and see what's going on with this guy.
Safe.
Yeah. But people like that, like he turned out to be one of the nicer people I ever met. He insisted on picking me up at the city limits and drive me in. He's like, my neighborhood's pretty bad. He's like, my neighbors are crackheads. And he was like, it was a rough area. And he's like, yeah, I know we're white trash, but I'm okay.
We're good.
We're okay.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yeah.
It was kind of wild though. We rolled up to his place, and he's like, yeah, I'm glad you're here, and I'd love to have a beer with you and just hang out with you on the porch kind of thing. So I hung out with him for a bit, and he's like, well, I got to go to work. I drive truck all night, but you can stay in my shed out back.
Oh God.
And he had set up this shed where he could go sleep during the day because he had kids running around. Like the house was full of him and his sister-in-law and his kids, and they had blind cats and like ferrets and goldfish, and like wife is a very large woman sitting there with a TV tray watching television, chain smoking the entire time I'm there inside the house. Did the sun
rap at all or no?
No.
Was this Eminem's
cousin? There's no Eminem vibes there. Like kids were kind of, it was intense. But we go back to this little shed, and the shed, I look at it as we're walking to it, I'm like, oh, this thing locks from the outside.
Oh shit.
Right? As a shed might, right?
Yeah.
But he's like, yeah, you can sleep back here. You won't get bothered by anybody. And it's all good. I'm thinking, okay, I'm putting my trust in the universe right now. And this is what's happening.
Yeah.
And for every story like that, I also had beautiful stories where I'd stay with, this woman and her daughter, and they took me to a street fair, and we had this like lovely day roaming around like Santa Barbara and hanging out with Amanda Panda, her daughter, and
Panda.
Yeah, like all these little things, right?
Yeah.
But there was also some pretty unique things that happened.
Some
along
hectic
that way.
shit that happened along the way. That's pretty cool. You're the second guy in a couple of episodes here that did a impromptu trip down to Tijuana.
No way.
Yeah, we had Julian, who founded Chasing Sunrise, who actually he started the hypothesis of me thinking about the purpose crisis. Julian's an amazing individual, and
what's this thing called?
Chasing Sunrise.
Cool.
Very cool. That's a company that's very much ahead of its time and in its infancy as well, that are probably going to address that purpose crisis, which is very cool.
Cool.
Anyways, and this one time he was in Vancouver and just put on his Facebook group that was called Chasing Sunrise at the time, I don't know how many members it was, and was like, hey, I'm going to Tijuana. You guys want to come? And he just dropped everything 4 days, went down to Tijuana to get tacos. He's like, I want tacos. Let's go get
so
tacos.
he drove there?
He drove there.
Okay.
So he didn't bike. So actually, oh my God.
A little different.
Now I'm just, totally different.
That's dope, though.
That's a cool story. Vlogged 100%. It, all that stuff, amazing, and connected with people, and that was cool. And then we had another podcast guest. Damn, we've been doing this podcast for a while. This is exciting.
What number are you on?
You might 35, 34, 36. I don't know. We're a couple ahead. We just released 32, but we're a couple of weeks ahead.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I don't know. We had another guy named Lucky who did a bike down to San Francisco and back for cancer research for his girlfriend. Never biked a day in his life. Yeah. You would love him. Oh my gosh.
Cool.
Anyways, super sidebar.
Yeah.
But that's always fun to connect the dots like that. I'm yet to do a hero's journey myself.
Yeah, man.
But I think
I'd love to do another one.
Is awesome. Yeah.
I'd love to do another one.
What's the next one?
Well, I've always had this idea of biking from Oslo in Norway all the way down through Europe, around the coast of France and into Morocco, like to go right through there. Like that's a big trip. That's a much bigger trip.
Over a couple months?
Yeah, like it would take,
okay,
it's funny because I've talked to my wife about it and I'm like, yeah, I think I got to do it alone because I know once I get on the bike, I'm not going to want to stop. Like I just want to get up and go every day.
No.
Like and then maybe we can double back and sightsee all those places. But it was interesting. Once I got into the rhythm of riding, like once you get into that, your body just wants to go. So that's why I didn't really drink on the trip. I could have a beer here and there, but like I didn't want to party much. I partied on my birthday. I definitely partied on my birthday. I was at a wild party in San Francisco in some tech millionaire's like 4-story house with this pool in the middle. Like you could see all 4 stories were wrapped around this indoor pool.
Right.
And it was just totally wild.
Right. The type of stories you just brush over.
These things just happen, man. Like I actually forgot about that till I just said it, but I didn't want to lie about not drinking at all. But like once you get into that rhythm, you just want to go. Like your body just wants to go. I just remember feeling like every morning I get up and my body was like, get on the bike and start riding, and just there's a really nice feeling to that and a nice rhythm to that. So that's something I think about. I've also, as I've gotten a little older, gotten more into the idea of doing a walking trip.
Oh.
Like I always have thought that pace feels just a little too slow. Like I don't know if I can hack it.
Walking's pretty slow.
But the truth is the more I spend time wandering and walking and thinking, the more I realize what a gift that would be to be able to spend a month walking or 2 months walking.
Where would you walk to?
I don't know. Somewhere nice. Like wherever.
Yeah,
like
doesn't matter.
Through somewhere nice to somewhere nice, right?
Well, there's a lot of nice places.
Like a lot of it is actually just about the trip. Tijuana was a destination because it was Mexico, right? Like it was a dart.
Border city.
It was just a dart. Originally it was LA, and then partly through I'm like, nah, I'm going all the way because I'm close enough. I might as well go.
Yeah, for sure.
But it was more about the journey than it was the
very cool. Your whole life seems like it's been more about the journey.
That's what life should be about, though.
Right.
Like that's actually what our life is. Our life is this moment right now, hanging out with one another right now in this conversation, right? Like our future self and our past self is right here with us right now. Yeah. And if we're not able to create moments like this, not every moment's going to be, sometimes you got to do shit that's not fun. But if you're not optimizing for your how your day is and how your week is, then you're kind of missing the point, I think.
Life is just a collection of moments.
It is, really.
I think.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I don't know. I hypothesize
about
this all the time.
Bob Dylan line or something?
I don't know, man. My mom probably told me
Lil
that
Uzi Vert line. I get those two mixed up a lot.
Yeah, Bob Dylan and Lil Uzi Vert. You know how it is. Two of my favorite artists. You know, no biggie.
I've been through both. It's all good.
What are you listening to right now?
What am I listening to?
What are you listening to right now? Lil Uzi? No.
No, I'm not listening to Lil Uzi too much. My guilty pleasure right now is Juice WRLD. I'm really into Juice WRLD.
Oh, really?
He's really poppy, but he's actually really enjoyable, and he's got some good songwriters and stuff.
That's amazing.
So I'm into Juice WRLD.
What's your substance? What's your meat and potatoes?
Well, so I basically listen to two types of music these days. It's either purely ambient stuff, like very, very ethereal things
Oceanic,
like that. Yeah, like there's a playlist on Spotify I've made, Nature of Work. It's called Nature of Work Ambient, but it's basically a collection of, just really ethereal type stuff that I listen to actually quite often now, even when I'm driving or doing stuff where I might otherwise be usually used to listen to just rap almost all the time. Mm-hmm. Now I put that on a lot because I find it just lowers my energy a lot and keeps me a lot more centered. I listen to a bunch of Crystal Bowl music. There's a great album by a local guy named Colin Hillstrom, and it's basically have you seen Crystal Bowls before?
No, I have not.
Basically, they're like these glass crystal bowls, and you use a mallet, and you can basically get them vibrating, and they're all different notes and frequencies. And you can do sound baths. Have you ever heard of a sound bath before?
No, I feel so ignorant right now.
So sound bath is he'll have these set up, and you'll all lie around in the room, and these vibrations are going. You can feel the vibrations in your body. Like some of the bowls are really big.
Wow.
But anyway, I listen to some, like, a bunch of trippy stuff like that, and then I listen to rap and R&B. So I listen to a lot of Black right now. Dope. I listen to a lot of. I'm really into, like, I'm trying to think of the rap. I'm listening to the new 2 Chainz a lot.
Yeah, great album.
It's a great album. I mean, especially those first few cuts are just so dope.
For sure.
Big fan of Meek.
Yes.
Who else right now?
Say something I disagree with, man. Come on.
Like late great Nipsey, like a lot. I listen to a lot of Nipsey Hussle.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. I just when I was in LA, I went and just visited Crenshaw and Slauson and just spent some time there and hung out there.
Yeah,
just to pay respects on that. And who else right now? Yeah, that's probably some stuff that I'm listening to right now.
My playlist is pretty flooded by Nipsey right now.
Yeah,
it's
you know what? I couldn't actually, like, when I heard the news, I couldn't listen to him for the first bit, but now it's ratcheting up and I'm listening to it a lot. It's actually, I don't normally get affected by this kind of stuff.
Me neither, man.
People I don't know, I'm not usually. It's like, okay, well, that's life. Like, I actually think that life comes and goes, and that's sort of how it is. Like,
that's
kind of
what it is.
But Nipsey was just doing a lot of good work, and he was just on a really, and you see how much response he's getting from.
It's crazy.
When Obama writes a letter, when the head of the LAPD says publicly that a known Rolling 60s Crip was doing great things in the community, like that's what tells you that. Yeah, that shit was different with Nipsey.
And dude, yeah, sure, on the street level, but you talk about things like Vector 90. You talk about how many pieces of property he could have bought that wasn't Crenshaw and Slauson. You talk about
I know.
His whole thing
He's
was
one of the very
access.
few people that stayed in his hood.
His whole thing was providing access.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And that's what killed him.
100%.
So, anyways, I don't mean to go off on a tangent.
Yeah, no,
it's crazy that
it's brutal.
Yeah. And we've had a couple podcasts since it's happened, and I wouldn't think you'd be the first one to bring it up, but you know what? That's awesome. I love it. I think there's a lot of parallels there, 100%. A ton of parallels there. Yeah. That's dope. I love that you're a hip hop fan. I got a huge smile on my face.
When I mentioned that to you,
I was like, what?
Before,
excuse me.
I was like, let's talk about rap. See, like my best buddies that we talk about rap. One of them lives in Victoria. One of them lives down in L.A. My brother lives down in L.A. And my other buddy's in town, but I'm on Bowen. So sometimes what we've tried to do is basically get on a Zoom call or a video call. Sweet. And do like album listens together. Hey. So once in a while, it doesn't happen that often because we're all so busy, but we actually wanted to do it with the 2 Chainz, but we didn't do it. But it's like when we know a really good albums. Of course, I listen to, I guess, Kendrick. I listen to, there's a whole bunch of other people I listen to. But when an album like that comes out, we say, okay, nobody listened to it. Let's all get together. Yeah. Let's all get a drink or get a blunt or whatever you're into.
Let's go.
And like, let's all put on headphones and rock it together. Because actually, the first time we ever did that years ago when Watch the Throne came out, and I got
you did that with Watch the Throne.
Yeah, and I got the crew together in my house, and and this is when we all lived together, and we had big speakers set up, and we banged that album. And that album was so fire when it came out. Like
when it came out, bro, it's so fire today. I mean, that album every day. I swear to God.
Totally.
Oh my God.
But the other thing, that was such a rad experience that we've tried to recreate it a few times. It's hard to do, but the other thing that I'm kind of into, and actually it's funny that my wife is more into it than I am, is some of the more like what's it called, like trapcore and like what's it called?
Like Tiller?
Do you know what it's called?
Black?
Do you know what she listens to? No, like Scarlord. Like
no idea.
It's called like it's basically like punk trap. It's basically like screamo trap.
Oh shit.
If you listen to it, it sounds like it's fully distorted screamo vocals over giant trap beats. And if you look at the concerts, they are the closest thing to like 70s, 80s punk shows, like crazy mosh pits. But anyway, I listen to a bit of that stuff too.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That I'm thinking Yeezus. Just with the
Yeezus was picking up on that a little bit, but and this is now, it's kind of like you've seen the way the young rap crowd, like the young rappers now, they're basically back into grunge and rock and rap, or sorry, like kind of grunge rap and punk look. Right. And so there is a genre of music that is straight up punk rap kind of,
which is like it's cool, it's innovative. Like no, I love it.
It's actually pretty fun, and it's great workup music. Like it'll get you.
Noted.
Super get you
noted.
Swole.
Get you super swole.
Get you swole. I sent it to my homie, and he just sent me a photo of him in the gym, like just going nuts because he was just so pumped on it.
That's perfect. You know what? That's going to be the YouTube one-liner right there. Steve Rio on how to get swole.
Yeah, Scarlord. Listen to lots of Scarlord.
Let's go, dude. Okay, I got to transition because I've been trying to get to it for a minute, but I'm really inspired by Briteweb.
Nice.
Arguably more inspired by Nature of Work. I haven't figured it out yet.
It's okay.
They're really cool, dude. I don't know how,
you can like
how
both.
else to put it. I'll try not to blow too much smoke, but it's going to happen anyways. Like there's parallels in life, and you talk about finding things that lights a fire underneath your ass, and all those things you're touching, whether it's human psychology, business, social impact, human optimization. Those are the things that I'm just trying to touch. Like,
100%.
So finding a person. Like I went through that whole, I'll be honest with you, I went through that whole business in Vancouver, 40 under 40. And I was like, that's cool. Supplement company this, interactive technology here, virtual reality here. This is cool. And then I found Briteweb, and I was like, whoa. And it changed my perspective on like, there's actually, because I'm still trying to, I feel like I'm always looking for North Stars. And I'm always looking for people that have put the pieces together that I'm trying to put together. And I had these different pieces in my head where I'm like, how does this connect with this, connect with this, connect with this? And then it all works to my strengths and something I can pursue. I haven't figured out. Ethical investing kind of does it for me in a way, but there's a certain level of digital that's not there. Anyways, and so I found Briteweb, and I'm like, this is completely next level. This is where we should be. And this is groundbreaking. And then I went deep on that, and then I was like, hold on, but he's missing something. And exactly what you're missing is everything you did with Nature of Work, right? So which came first? Was it Nature of Work or was it Briteweb?
No, Briteweb has been around for
a long time, right?
For quite a while. Yeah,
it's very, very polished, and I know that
Nature of Work's like brand new.
So I say that in that like Nature Briteweb looks like a very well functioning, polished business. And Nature of Work, when I looked at it, I was like, someone's being extremely thoughtful about this. So I thought, okay, maybe that could have developed slower, but on the back burner for a long period of time. Because Briteweb is like a machine,
Briteweb, I started basically in 2011, and I had an agency before that. And I guess in that experience, I realized that I wanted to be doing social impact focused work. And I didn't know what that meant exactly at the time. Like at the time when we started that in 2011, social impact was not really a thing yet. Like it definitely wasn't a mainstream thing. And the idea of a social venture, I had never heard that term. That term was like not on the radar.
Yeah. David Suzuki was still outcasted and this type of shit,
Right. who's now one of our bigger clients in Canada, which is dope.
You work with David Suzuki?
Yeah, we do a ton of work with David Suzuki Foundation. Yeah, so that's dope. What's so wild is that nobody. I'll get back to the point, but nobody in the States, because most of our clients are in the U.S.
Right.
Nobody in the U.S. knows who David Suzuki is.
No way.
Where he's like just a guy we all grew up on, like a name we all, I'm like, even your demographic, like a lot of people don't know who he is, but that's dope.
That's very true. I grew up on Hornby. So
yeah, you grew up on Hornby Island, so you're all over it.
Trust me, I know who David Suzuki is. Yeah.
But anyway, I started that company just thinking, I want to do something social impact. Because actually at my previous agency, whenever we did little pro bono work. We were like more of corporate agency. And when we did pro bono stuff, though, for like a local community nonprofit or something like that, I would end up doing tons of hours on it and just get super excited about it. And there was one organization called Sisterhood, which used to be like a female rap festival in Vancouver. This is sick. Almost a decade. Well, it was a decade ago. I don't know how they pulled that off, but they would have like Rhapsody and folks like people like that come up and all sorts. It was like pretty hippied out, but anyway, it was pretty dope. But I just remember working with them and my friend Anna Hillier, who was running them at the time, and just spending a lot of time realizing, look at how energized I feel by this, right? And I remember having a realization, going, man, I'm going to work a lot of hours in my life,
of course,
and if I'm going to work a lot of hours, I better be doing something that I'm passionate about. And so I left my half of the agency, my previous agency, to my partner, and spun up Briteweb like right after that, basically.
Where's the name come from?
Honestly, I had shortly after I left my last company, I didn't have a name. I went to this conference and I met the founder of the conference. I ended up going on a walk with the founder of the conference. And I remember in my mind going, oh shit, this is the founder of the conference. He's asking me all these questions. It was actually a nonprofit social impact tech conference. So it was like a real eye opener for me being there. Like it was called Web of Change. It still exists today. But I remember seeing the term Web of Change. And I'm like, oh, I'm into web. Oh, and I'm changing. I'm going to go to that. Like that's literally my thought process. And I show up at this conference, and anyway, I end up on this walk with the founder, who's a friend of mine to this day, an awesome guy, Jason. And I remember walking up the trail with him from one building to the other. This is up on Cortez Island, actually, and up at Hollyhock. And I remember him asking me a bunch of questions and me going, man, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Like, it's like I was going through a bit of an identity crisis because at that time I was young and I have a name badge and it doesn't have a company on it. I just left my company. It was like I just had a Gmail account. Now that's kind of a normal thing. At that time, I felt like, I don't know. I just felt like, man, I don't know who I am.
Yeah, right? It had to be Steve.
I don't know what I do even, right? Like, so I was talking to him anyway. A week later, he offered me this insane gig, and actually going back to like things that you do where you have no idea how to do it. He offered me this gig to organize a media center, basically a physical center at the UN climate conference. So it'd be off-site as a place where people could come edit video and do talks and collaborate, where all the biggest NGOs in the world could come and have their like media and communications people meet up. And this was in Copenhagen. And he's like, do you want to do this thing? Do you want to run this thing? Denmark. I think you'd be great for this. And I'm like, yes.
How old are you?
I would have been 29. Yeah, I would have been 29 when that happened. Yeah. I would have just turned 29. And so he offered me this gig, and I was like, holy shit, yes, sounds great. I had no idea how I was going to do that. I'd never done anything. I'd organized like my own concerts. Like I'd never organized this. Anyway, I needed a name because I needed to incorporate. And so I don't know, like within a couple of days, like that week, I picked a name, got incorporated, set up the bank account, and then I flew to Spain to do the first part of that thing, and then flew to New York. I was like right into this project right away. So it was kind of like, all right. So that was in 2009. So basically I did my first project with Briteweb, and then I came back from there, and in January I actually started working with a friend on the Cheaper Show, which was a massive art show in Vancouver that I ran it for its 9th and its 10th year, and then it wrapped up. But it was it was a massive art show. So I actually did that small project with Briteweb, then took a break and worked on this art show for 2 years as the executive director. Basically, this show had been growing like crazy, but they had no incorporation. They had no, like, we got the nonprofit status. They had no corporate sponsors besides getting some free beer and stuff. Like, and it was like 8,000 people came to the show in one night.
And no
it was
corporate
insane.
sponsors.
It was like this. Yeah. My friends had pulled together this unbelievable show, but they needed somebody with a bit more of a business mind.
Totally.
I was still rough around the edges, but I pulled a bunch of shit together. And so I did that for a couple of years, and then I came back in 2011 and got Briteweb back. Like, that's when I started working on building Briteweb.
Super fucking cool. And so Nature of Work is a recent birth of a company, which is super cool. We'll get there in a second. Briteweb, though. So you talk so much about a not decentralized. You talk about a distributed network of workers, of minds, of ideas, and that is a very interesting concept to me, because I think about, as a young person, we think about, I don't want to work a 9 to 5, right? So when we go into the workforce right now, it's like, I want to have something that's cool and it has a cool office and has a beer cooler, right? I need to have bean bags in my office to be cool, right?
Is that on your checklist?
100%. My office does not have that. But come on. Anyways,
flight risk.
Yeah. It has to be cool. It has to pay well, and that's about it, and we just don't want to have, we don't have flexible hours. We don't want to have that show up here, leave here. Or if we do, we want it to be 10 to 6, not 9 to 5.
Or kind of like on your own terms, right?
Or on your own terms, or 8 to 4, just not 9 to 5. I can't say I have a 9 to 5. That's like, oh my God, right? Can't do that. It's like
a status thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's a status thing. And so we constantly think about ways we can get around that.
Right.
And we want to have flexibility and maneuverability. We want to have malleability in our life. And so trying to find a way to have that is almost impossible. Now you've created a structure and organization where individuals can do that. Yeah. But I have always found that working underneath one roof is really inspiring, because I get to, sit next to the CEO or whoever it may be, or my quote unquote boss or manager, and I see how they're moving. And that's a really interesting experience for me. Yeah. And that's why I had always thought previously, I still don't even know what I think, first off, let me be clear. But now I'm at a point in my thinking where I'm like, oh no, like a distributed network that everyone wants, where, I'm working on my laptop in Bali, right. That can't work, because there's not that interpersonal communication, that interweave of community culture and company culture. But somehow you've made this work, and now you're working with other companies to make it work on a larger scale. Right. That seems completely preposterous to me. Very cool, but from a practical, tactical standpoint, I'm like, what? Yeah. How does that work? How does a distributed network really work of workers? How does that even...
Yeah, it's been kind of an experiment, because again, entering into territory where there's not a lot of clear cases or role models to draw from.
Is there any?
There are remote companies. There are companies that are fully remote. Like, so that's a thing. Like, I don't think that's necessarily a brand new thing at all.
Okay.
But even that, like, there's not a lot of literature or studies, or there's not a lot of stuff there even. There is some stuff. So I did some research and thought about it. I mean, this all started for a couple of reasons. One is I didn't like coming to the office every day. I didn't get any work done in the office. It's too distracting. There's too much noise and people around. Like, I need to put my head down and get work done. I found, like, I liked coming to the office once in a while because I'm an extrovert, and I like to see people and talk, but then I end up just talking all the time and not getting a lot done. But so I wanted to basically free myself up to basically be able to travel and stuff. And I knew sooner or later I was going to move to somewhere like Bowen Island. I hadn't yet made that plan, but that was happening. Yes. We also started having clients all over the country, like all over the U.S. actually, not really even in Canada. And we were traveling all the time, so we're always out of the office anyway. So I was like, okay. The other thing I thought about was, man, the price of living in Vancouver is totally insane. And I looked around at my staff and I'm like, how soon before these folks have to start moving to Victoria or moving to the Sunshine Coast or moving to Squamish or whatever? And so I thought, like, man, I better start creating a model that's going to allow for that as soon as possible. But it's been a few years of figuring that out. So the second piece we went remote. We have co-working space in Vancouver, but mostly people work remote. Like, they come into the office 1 or 2 days a week, maybe. Some of them almost never come into the office. Some of them are on like year-long traveling sabbaticals where they're working in, like, they're on the remote year program. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about it. Yeah.
Where you're like in a different city every month for a year.
Did you design that, or did you?
No. That's like some companies doing that. So you sign up, you pay $2,000 a month, and they organize all your travel. You set you up with a co-working space and an apartment and like a phone chip and transportation from the airport, and basically you're set up in a new city each month, and you travel all through like South America and I think Asia or something. You're kind of all over the place. So we've had a few people of our staff do that, or just work from home or whatever. So that's kind of been going, and that part has been a little bit easier. And then the second piece we added was, I've been thinking a lot too about what does it mean? What does work look like in 10 or 15, 20 years? And like, I think about people like you who you have a day job, you know, but you're also building something and you're doing other things. And like, how can I create a model that allows for intelligent people who want to work hard to work for me, as well as do whatever else they want to do? Maybe it's travel, maybe it's raise kids, maybe it's be in school, maybe it's have their own side business or a business they're trying to get going. Or maybe they just like to work really hard, but take 2 months off a year and no job is going to let you do that.
Yeah.
Right. So how do I create a model that breaks away from that? So instead of just thinking about full-time staff, we have what we call the network, which is people who are just freelancers who go through like a pretty thorough vetting process, and they apply, they go through a vetting process, then they go through a training process, then we start handing them projects and building them into work. But we have folks, like at one point we had people working in 25 cities around the world. And they're all over the place. And what we found is like, we have to be really careful about finding people who are values aligned, who are passionate about what we do, who are really good at what they do. Like, they have to be really good at being self-managed and taking care of their shit. We can't babysit someone in Germany.
Yeah, it just doesn't
or babysit somebody in South America. Like, it's just not going to work.
Or babysit 50 people in 50 different cities.
Yeah,
it's like, no.
Not possible.
Yeah.
But it creates a lot of flexibility for people. So even we had people who used to work for us full-time switch to that model. Like, I had one guy who's like, yeah, we're going to move to, where did he go? I think LA for a while. And he's like, he phoned me. Oh, I was in LA. He phoned me to resign. He's like, yeah, we're going to Bali for a year. And I got to resign, Steve. I'm like, why do you got to resign? He's like, I'm like, do you like working for Briteweb? He's like, I love it. I love Briteweb. It's like, well, just switch you to the network and drop your hours down to 25 a week. Will that be enough? He's like, yeah, that's perfect. I can surf every day. And so, like, you know, so we have this flexibility suddenly to allow people to do that. Now, you're right, though. There is a real component around making sure that people get connection and stay connected. So I think those are things that we're still working through, trying to figure out how to do that. A couple of the ways we think about that is we have an annual retreat where we invite anyone, anyone who's even freelance with us. Like, they're invited. They have to fly themselves to where we are, but everything else is paid for. And we have like a 2-3 day retreat where we all connect, we hang out, we just do social activities, and we get bonded, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And then we go back into the world and do our thing. We're thinking about adjusting the way we operate our office, because we have this co-working space, but we don't really use it. So we're thinking about adjusting that further and creating more of like an intentional, maybe once a quarter, everybody comes to a bigger space and we just have a big jam day kind of thing and hang out. But I don't know, like, to me, this is the future of the way we live and stuff. Is like, you should be able to live wherever you want. And what works for Joss is going to be different than what works for Steve. Like, Joss might like to listen to like Mariah Carey all day.
This is true.
And, you know,
dirty pleasure,
work in a bathing suit. And like, I'm not really down for that. Right. So Joss should be able to do what he's into, and I can listen to like some really good music in like a 3-piece suit or whatever I'm into.
Perfect.
But like, you know, like, create the environment that works best for different people. And to your point, like, some people are early, like to wake up early and work early. Some people like to work at night. Some people have kids and have sporadic hours they got to work. So who cares as long as you're getting your shit done?
So that's the hard part. How do you track, are you getting your shit done? Are you really devoted to this? Like, for instance, if I'm working next to my manager or whoever is responsible for the work that I'm doing, right. You know, I have someone that is literally looking at my progress and saying, okay, this is good, this is good, this is good. Or if there's not progress, okay, well, what's happening? I can break that down based on what Joss is doing here or what he's doing here. And I can tangibly make, you know, I can shift gears and put pieces in place so he can be successful in his job.
Yeah.
Now, if he's, you know, in the south of France and working, you know, in the network, and then also you don't necessarily know where these people are. You don't know if they're fulfilling their potential. That's a big thing for, like, I coach basketball. And so it's like, if I see you there working, I know what you're capable of, because I can have a tangible texture of your personality and who you are. And then I can then push you to your potential. But if you're,
so for that's a physical thing, right?
Sure. Well, sure. But it's also creative potential is also
that's true.
Right?
I think what's interesting, I found actually in a bit of contrast to that, is when somebody is removed, like if they're in the office with you, you might just really like them, or you might think they look like they're working hard all day, but they're getting shit all done.
Yeah.
Right.
Good point.
But when somebody is on the other side of the world or just across the city, and all you see is what did they put on the Google Drive today? Like, what files did they upload? What did they accomplish on the to-do list? Like we actually have to be pretty organized to be able to make this work. So we've got our processes all mapped out. We're tracking everything. Like we have to run a very tight ship to make this work. So it is a lot of work. Like, it's hard. But at the same time, you also can see quite clearly if people are delivering or not, because that's the main thing you see is their actual work product.
Deliverables, yes, no.
Yeah, and it's all knowledge work. So it's all digital files and communications and stuff like that. So it works okay. Now, to your point, like, are they living up to their full potential or not? I mean, we just hopefully hire people that are really good at what they do and deliver high quality work that we think is of the quality that we care about.
Right.
And that's about it. But it is, honestly, it is not the easiest path. To me, I'm trying to build like a business for the future in a current world where, like, even a lot of the regulations, the tax laws, the HR policies, all these things don't really make sense for the way we work. There's lots of things where we feel like, well, we're kind of in a gray area. I don't know if we're doing something that's technically not allowed. Now, we're very ethical. We really think through how we approach everything. So I think I just use that as like, as long as we're ethical, no one's going to get mad, and then we're not going to have any problems.
Right.
But it's really interesting being in a time where we're sort of ahead of the curve. There's nobody really to draw inspiration from. There's only a few companies out there that are really doing this well. So it's been an interesting journey. It's definitely like been a harder path than I think, because I'm a guy who I can see something out in the distance, I can visualize it, I can paint the picture, and I'm like, we're going there.
Yeah.
And like with the network launching the distributed model, originally I was like, okay, we'll build a business plan, we'll think about it for 6 months, maybe we'll take a loan or raise some money to launch it. And then I was like, no, let's put a blog post up with a form to apply for our network, and let's get it popping. And like,
let's get this shit popping. Let's go.
And the next, that was in September of 2016.
Oh my God.
And in 2017, by the end of 2017, 70% of our billable work was being done by people in the network. Like, we went from 0 to 100 really fast.
Wow.
And it was super fun. Our company grew a lot. And now we're sort of tightening that up and figuring out, okay, now how do we get this model right? You know, there's a bunch. I think the hardest thing is, how do you continue to create community? Mm-hmm. My main vision for the whole thing was, and is for the whole thing, is how do we create a community of people who are passionate about something, that are not tied to us contractually in the sense of being an employee, but they are contributing and they want to be a part of something, that we're offering a level of value, then they're offering a level of value back, that people want to stick around and be part of that in the long term. How do we create that is totally flexible? It's like a far more natural system where things can come and go. Like, one of our guys who's been working for me actually since my old company. So he's been working for me for well over a decade, but now he's in the network in Briteweb. And that allows him, like right now, next week, he's launching, him and his husband, they do musicals once a year. They write and produce a musical every year. So cool. Once a year, they need some time off to pop that off, and he can wind his work down and do that for a little while. He goes to Burning Man every year, so
of course
he gets to, you know, take the time to go do that, and yet he still has consistent work, and so it's like, to me, it's a really interesting model to get right. It's really hard. It's taken a lot of work. It's not working perfectly yet. Like you say, Briteweb's a well-oiled machine. It does pretty well, but it's still, you know, business is always evolving, and there's always
that's the thing with
things
truly great organizations, is externally they look like a well-oiled machine. Internally, they're fucking grinding, right? And there's that will always exist, and that's beautiful. Especially
when you're always trying to do something new and innovative and better. Like, you're always like, I'm always wrestling with how to, you know, deal with my own desire to be better all the time. And not just relax a little bit and
communicate that to your team.
Yeah.
Fuck it, really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had a quick statement there where you said we're trying to build something that doesn't exist yet, and for a world and a work environment that doesn't exist yet, we're trying to be a futurist in many regards. Cool. So that must mean, as a listener, I'm thinking, hey, that must mean that Steve has an idea of a world. He has an idea of a world in 15, 20 years, or whatever that time span may be, where the workforce is going to look like X, and right now it looks like Y.
Yeah.
What are X and Y? Or, well, we know what today is. What's the future look like?
Well, I hope that it's a place where people can have diverse skill sets and can tap into interesting projects with different companies that they find interesting. Like they can tap into various things and have more autonomy in terms of how they contribute to society and contribute to business, right? So if they and that there's a way for them to do that while also having ongoing learning opportunities, a sense of community, a sense of connection and purpose and impact, without having to say, yes, I am committing to you full time and signing up for the regular routine of 2 to 3 weeks off a year.
Which is just
like it's kind of just like, how do you create all of those aspects without the traditional, and how do you have the flexibility to live where you want, to have the rhythm of work and life that you want, like I was talking about vacation time, or the amount of hours you want to work in a week, or there's lots of different ways to think about that. So just a way it's more flexible. And it also means that as a company, when you pivot to do something new, you need a different type of skill set. You can quickly find those people, onboard them, and keep them running. You don't have to lay off a bunch of people and fire a bunch of people. Like the company gets flexibility, and we need to be agile in this new environment, right? That we're in. Like the way technology is moving at this pace, we're constantly having to pick up new skills. Now, if we had to hire a new developer for every time a new coding language became popular, like it would be a constant rotation.
Right.
But instead, we have some, a steady base of people that do certain types of work. And if we need a customized thing for a specific project, bring them in for a project, then they move on to the next thing, and we're good too. So I think it's just creating a level of flexibility that is in touch with the way we are able to stay, like that lines up with the technology we have in place now.
Right. Okay. So then, no, I'm on board with everything you're saying. What do you think about platforms like Fiverr, platforms that you can literally just go grab someone and utilize them at, very cheap?
I feel like those are really just capitalist extraction models. Like I think that in some cases there's probably people where, and mostly on Fiverr, you're not paying $5, I don't think, for stuff.
No.
I don't know exactly, but there are places, like I think on the one hand, it's creating an economy where $5 American is a lot in certain parts of, like, say, the Philippines or wherever, somewhere, just pick a spot. And so maybe in those cases, it's creating an economy that is like an interesting economy where you are actually putting money into a good amount of money. I think it's fairly extractionist. It's very transactional. It's not like, I think a lot of what's happening in technology and a lot of what's happening in the world right now is not based on actually creating better human lives. I don't think Fiverr is trying to make anybody's life better. So, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know.
I don't think you're wrong. I'd bet against it. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I think I think last thing I'd say about that is I think what Briteweb's trying to do, there's lots of people who hire contractors and they treat them kind of like cogs, and they put them in, they make them do the work, and they spit them back out. I'm really trying to say, like, this is the way the world is moving towards a more flexible workforce. How do we do that in a way that still creates a sense of community, opportunities to learn, opportunities to contribute impact, so you actually feel fulfilled by the work. You're not just a cog in the wheel sort of thing, which I think is what Fiverr is, or any of those things are.
Totally, but those three things right there: community, a sense of community and culture, impact, and continuing education and learning.
Yeah. From
a distributed workforce, how do you tackle that?
I don't know. Slowly.
I couldn't even, like...
We're working on it. Things like, first of all, I think when you have purpose, deep purpose and values in your company, and you attract people who are interested in those things, that community happens quite organically. Like, suddenly you have a bunch of people that care about what you're doing. I think if we were I think we have an advantage being Briteweb doing social impact work. So everything we do is with nonprofits. We do for-profit work as well if it's got a strong social impact component. Our work intrinsically has meaning and purpose.
Right.
So we attract people for that. So it's a lot easier to get people engaged on a deeper level than just punching in, punching out. So that's I think a core component. Like your company has to be doing something that means something to people. That doesn't, there's lots of ways to talk about that. But I think, and then you have to put a lot of energy into how do you create community and connection, and do that virtually and create ways to meet up and do learning opportunities. And I don't think Briteweb is on the cusp of getting that right. Like I think we're working on that. I don't think we're mastering that yet, but we're working really hard on it. And then also creating things like our retreat and trying to create meetups in cities where there's more than a few people. When we realize there's a few people, we try and get them together for coffees or for beers or for whatever, and help them organize that kind of stuff. So just trying to create ways for people to stay connected. Like it's not rocket science. It's mostly just actually caring enough to put the effort in to do that.
Care.
Like I'm not running Briteweb to be a super high profit machine. It's not. It makes okay money. It's at a decent scale. We're a multi-million-dollar company. That's great. But if I wanted it to be a high profit machine, I would not be servicing nonprofits. I would not be a remote distributed team. Probably. There might be a financial advantage to that once the model matures. Right now, it's not making us any more money. So to me, it's about, I want to improve the quality of people's lives and push the boundaries of what's possible in this world. So that's more interesting to me, as long as I'm making enough money to live my life, then. And
more fulfilled.
100%. I wake up excited in the morning.
Yeah. You don't have to go to work. Literally. Never have to go to work.
No.
When Steve goes to work, where does he go?
I walk out of my house and I walk 10 feet to my little office.
Which is a separate building?
Yeah, it's a small separate building on my property that I renovated when we first moved there and turned it into this beautiful little space.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's epic. And honestly, when I built that space and I sat down at the first time, that was one of the first times I felt really successful.
Wow.
Just because I love the work I do, and to have a space like that where I could see the ocean, bright big windows, beautiful. We kind of custom made our desks, and my wife and I designed the space and made it ourselves. It was oh wow, I made it. It was a funny moment.
I don't doubt it. But you also spoke about a moment when you sat down there and were productive there. So that's very interesting, because I'm the exact same way. I just want to create spaces that inspire me.
Totally.
And are perfectly crafted and designed for me. And I could never imagine. So when I heard you say that you got to this space and weren't productive, I was like, oh, fuck, I'm in trouble, because that's where I'm going.
Well, it just made me realize that it's not and that was the moment when I went down started doing the research for Nature of Work, and that was 2+ years ago.
Okay.
And so I built this beautiful office. I felt man, I finally made it. I sit down. I'm going to get the best work of my life done here. It's so quiet.
Yeah.
And I could not focus at all. And the main thing that happened for me there was actually I had a panic attack, because I was holy shit, I got a lot to do, and I've been working my whole life to get here. Why can't I work? Why can't I think? Why can't I stay focused? And so I stopped everything I was doing and spent a day or two really reflecting on what was going on, what's happening in my life right now. And I realized that we had been moving, we're renovating our house, we're doing all this stuff. We'd moved multiple times because we were renting in Vancouver, and our apartments kept getting put on the market for sale, and it was just kind of a chaotic time. Mm-hmm. And I had let any of my sort of regular routines go. And I hadn't yet really done any of the research on focus and attention and all the stuff that I know now, but I just knew something wasn't right. And that's what actually got me going. And somebody put me on to Deep Work, which is a book by Cal Newport. And that sent me down the path. And then I basically took his book and looked at, okay, he's referencing all these studies, go find all those studies, read all the studies, then go find a bunch more books, then just went down this deep hole of thinking about this. Mm-hmm. It was really interesting because it also made me think a lot about my team, being a remote team and being a distributed team. There's a lot of technology in between us to keep us connected. Right. And so I also was seeing a lot of my staff being really overwhelmed by Slack. Slack to me is just chaos. Right.
A lot of channels, man.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And it's just a nonstop, never ending, meeting basically, like 10 meetings going on at once forever. Or 30 at my company. So it got me thinking a lot about that too. So that was interesting. That's what set it off for me. It was a lot of what I've done is a personal, like going remote was, hey, I want to be remote. I want flexibility. I don't want to be tied down to a location. What's that model look like? And then nature of work came out of that too, was, man, I got to get my brain back, because it turns out that even, it doesn't matter how beautiful your environment is, if what's going on in your head is not tight, tight, you're in trouble.
Yeah, no, for sure. You definitely seem like someone that wants to keep, your ducks in a row. You want to keep things tight, physically, mentally, socially, like just everything. You like to have things.
I'm a highly disciplined person. And I think a lot about that. Yeah.
Which is extremely hard to get your head around. Willpower is a muscle.
It is.
Right. Willpower is a muscle. That's one of the first things I learned, because I come from a basketball background.
Right.
And it was always like, you always talk about these guys that work harder. They just work harder. They're just another gear. Kobe Bryant, just another gear. And he has a 4 a.m. workout. By 3:30, he's in there sweating. He's already got 100 shots up. Just like unparalleled work. So from a very young age, I've always been very interested about how we train that muscle efficiently, effectively, so I can just become second nature, create habits, to be the most efficient, most disciplined person possible in every facet of my life. The first podcast, this is just bringing me back here, the first podcast that we did here, we were talking about discipline, and I was like, I don't mess with someone if I look at their shoes and I can see there's a crease on the back of their shoes, like meaning they don't untie or tie their shoes, like, those people, like even like
ruthless,
even like the slippers and shit, like if you step on the back of your shoes, that's it, like don't come to my house. Anyways, and so I've been obsessed with that from very early age. What got you on this path? Were you always this way around self-discipline and willpower and keeping things tight around you, or is this developed, or how did this come to fruition?
I think that I've always been really intrinsically motivated.
Right.
I mean, like I talk about when I picked up a guitar at 12, 13, it really isn't an exaggeration that anytime I was in my house, I had my guitar on, I was practicing guitar.
Right.
And I hung around with a lot of friends who played a lot of video games through my teens and into my early 20s. Like we all smoked a lot of weed back then. And that didn't slow me down at all. Like I was still, like they'd be playing video games and I'd be sitting in the back writing songs. Like, and I became a very good guitar player and a great songwriter and excellent. I was always really driven that way. I do think that there was a point in my early 20s where I realized that on certain things I was really motivated and other things I wasn't that disciplined. And I forget what I called it. I had some funny thing in my head, like in my early 20s, I think it was like man of action or something. I had this phrase that I came up with and I thought, like, what would a man of action do? And I think this was when I was still smoking a lot of weed and I would put off a lot of things in my life. Like I was disciplined in certain areas, but not in others. Yeah. And I just started telling myself, okay, like what would a man of action do? He would do this thing right now. Yeah. And he would just get it done. And he would never, and it just kind of became, it's just habit forming. Like you say, it's willpower. You build the muscle and you just get into a place where those things become easy. Like making your bed, flossing your teeth, doing all those little things, they just become routine and they're just part of your daily routine. And I hate going to bed without flossing my teeth. I hate it. I almost never do. Probably 3 times a year do I ever do that.
I believe it.
Right. But and those are like the little things. But then in terms of discipline also needs to be, focused around intelligently. Because I think through my 20s, I was really grinding hard, but I wasn't working intelligently. I wasn't not knowing any of the stuff I know now about how to actually structure your time and organize all the stuff we're teaching in Nature of Work. I didn't know any of that stuff, but I also wasn't strategically thinking through, okay, what are the steps? Where do I want to be in 2 years? How do I work backwards? How do I make a plan for that? What are the steps that I need to do? For instance, I would work really hard on stuff, but I was neglecting creating the social connections I needed, which in my late 20s, I didn't really realize just how much of the world rotates on social connections, right? Yeah. And how so much you can be the best at something, but if nobody knows who you are and you don't have any friends in the industry, there's no point, right? So there's things like that where I wasn't really intelligent about how I used my discipline. Totally. Or I would let my discipline became a monster sometimes, and I wouldn't do anything cool or fun. I would just grind super hard. Yeah. So it's always been a bit of a balancing act, but it's always been there for me, I think. Yeah.
No, I feel you 100% from there. How did that manifest in a bad way? You say that I would become a monster at some point. What does that mean?
I just mean that I would put myself under way too much pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I would set myself up to do things that were virtually impossible or just barely possible, and work so hard, and just put myself like that. I didn't even enjoy it. You know, like by the time I would just do certain things where I would just set unreasonable goals, like, and do kind of insane things where I was just working way too hard. Like there was no, like, what's the point of working hard if you're sort of miserable and you're so tired? And by the, like for instance, like I'd be organizing, I remember organizing the release party for my solo album, and it was such a complex thing. I was going to perform the album live, which was a super layered album, so it needed 10 different musicians, and I was going to have live video projections for each song designed by different artists.
Wow.
In the city, and they're going to do custom pieces for me, and I'm organizing all this stuff, and it was like, but it was a super complex show to pull off at the time.
Right.
At that time, there was no digital, you couldn't plug computers in for digital projections or something. It was like a complex thing to do at the time.
Right.
No, there was, but it was just, I don't know, like everything about it was just, I couldn't have made it harder for myself.
Yeah.
And I remember at the show, like I just was so stressed out, like it had got to the wire. We were, it was just so much work. And then I don't even remember the show because I was like blackout stressed. Right. So I don't know. Like, I think there's a line there where you got to find that you can still enjoy yourself. Like I just think about like some of the most successful people in life, are actually some of the most unhappy people in life. So I think you got to find the balance where you're achieving great things and doing cool stuff, but you're not doing it at the sake of your friends and family, of your own health, of your happiness. You got to just find some balance there.
There comes a point, there comes a point for me personally where when you're blackout stressed, you don't remember anything else.
Nah.
Like, it's just gone. Like, there's like times where I don't even remember months of that.
Yeah.
And someone will be like, hey, remember this last time we were here at this place, we did this? And I was like, we were here?
Yeah. When
the fuck were we here? Are you sure we were here? Like, I do not remember that. And that scares the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And that's one of the, I'm pretty stubborn. Like, I'm a pretty stubborn guy. Like, I'm pretty stubborn. And so I don't hear shit easily. I try to be super open-minded and being, learning to listen has been a great function of this podcast, but I'm very much stubborn. And like, if I want it out there, same way as you, like, okay, I see it. As soon as I saw it, now I've had it and I'm there. Right. So having someone go back and say, dude, you were so gone on that. You literally missed 3 years of your life. Right. And me being in a spot where I'm coming up to my prime, I don't want to miss that shit.
Right.
I don't want to miss that shit at all. Like, I want to be there and present for every second. So that makes me think, okay, maybe let's tone it back a little bit. Think about a 30 or 40 or 50-year game.
Yeah.
Not think about a 5-year game. Put the social pressures aside and just like go have fun and be able to enjoy that. Because I have a constant guilt complex, right?
Yeah, it's wild. I have that too. I still have it. Yeah, but
you still have it to this day.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't listen to it as much, and actually, it's been really helpful doing a lot of the research I've done, because one of the things I've realized is how valuable and productive rest is. Like, that's one of the biggest transitions for me. Mm-hmm. I used to never want to rest or take a day off, right? There's always something that can be done. Mm-hmm. And learning that that's just not true, like that actually taking rest will accelerate when you get back to things. You'll be smarter, you'll have better ideas, you'll be faster. All of the things are true, both physically and cognitively. Mm-hmm. This is true for like athletes. They work out a lot. Like, you talk about Kobe Bryant, he did not work out for 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Of course not.
His muscles would waste away. He'd be screwed, right? You take breaks, and the best athletes in the world really learn to relax well. Like, they actually focus on relaxing really well. So that I'm trying to just really understand that and live that out now in my life too. Is like, it's funny, like one of the things in nature of work in terms of the habits you form is just basic stuff, like take at least a half day off a week. Start with that. Get it up to 1, get it up to 2. Like, take a day off where you aren't on technology, or you're not thinking about work. You're doing something social. You're doing something outside. You're doing something physical. You're doing something that is completely different than what you are working on.
Right.
And that you will absolutely come back the next day smarter and faster.
Yeah.
Because your subconscious mind had time to actually process everything you've been thinking about and working on.
Mm-hmm.
So that for me has been helpful in knowing that rest is actually productive. I can't sit on a beach for 5 days. Like,
no, get out of here.
No.
Yeah, totally. So you speak a lot about, in Nature of Work, you speak a lot about being workers in the knowledge economy.
Yeah.
And so as a worker in the knowledge economy, meaning, and I perceive that to be, you're not physically using your skills to build something or manual labor of that nature. Is that somewhat correct?
Yeah, like anybody who's working on a computer or working with creating documents and creating
ideas
information
or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah, that's what a knowledge worker is.
So, which most of us are, right?
Yeah.
So, from a person in that perspective, how do we learn to relax? Because if you're a physical worker, it's very easy. You just take time off. You don't work physically.
There's a clearer separation when you do physical work.
So for instance, if I'm working on a project or I'm working on something creatively, I'm constantly thinking about that.
Yeah.
I can't, I don't have that switch. So as a worker in the knowledge economy, how do I learn to relax?
Yeah, I think it is understanding the basic cycles of things, like in how our bodies work, how we're designed. First of all, we are designed for about 4 to 5 hours of really hard cognitive work in a day.
That's so little.
Before our cognitive performance goes down. So we can do more than that, but you're going to do more. You're going to be working at a lower capacity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trying to do your best work, you've got about 4 to 5 hours of your best work per day. So that's one thing. Like understanding that. That doesn't mean you can't throw in some meetings and do some other stuff. You also need to take breaks. You need to rest in order to cycle up. You can't. Your phone is going to die if you don't charge it. Like it's basic stuff there. I think the other thing in terms of learning how to rest is recognizing that what real rest actually is. So I think a lot of us, when we finish work, we go home, we sit on the couch and we watch Netflix, or we sit on our phones, or we sit on the internet or YouTube or whatever. Mm-hmm. And Netflix maybe a little bit, but the rest of those things, like flipping through things on your phone, is not cognitively relaxing at all. It's very hard on your brain. Mm. It's emotionally and cognitively exhausting. So a lot of times what we're doing throughout our day, so first off, while we're at work, we get 5 minutes off or we're having lunch, and instead of relaxing, we're on our phone. That's not relaxing. So first of all, we can introduce proper breaks during our workday. So I found, like, I had this a couple weeks ago, and as a good reminder for myself, I had these 2 crazy days back to back, like where I had, I think, something like 20 something meetings each day. Like it was just a really chaotic couple of days. And the one day, the Thursday, I had these little 5-minute breaks a couple times. I'd put on a great song. I'd literally get up, move around, dance a bit, like just get outside, breathe some fresh air.
Because you're aware,
Yeah, I just took those couple 5-minute breaks during the day. I took 30 minutes at lunch. I had lunch with my wife. We talked face to face like normal human beings.
Wow.
Right? And then the next day I had the same kind of day, but they were so back to back that I had to do email over lunch, and I didn't get those 5-minute breaks. And at the end of the Thursday, the first day, I felt great. Like I was energized. I was pumped about the work I was doing. Second day, I was so bagged that I was like, I have to go for a walk right now. I can't talk. My wife was like, can I come for a walk with you? I was like, nah, I just need space. And that was the easiest difference, was just taking a couple 5-minute times throughout the day where you're actually technology free, where you take what I refer to as good rest. Same thing when you actually take time in the evenings. Like when you get home, do you play video games? Do you sit on your phone? Or do you do something that's cognitively relaxing? Like do a puzzle, like read a book, like talk to friends, do something social, do something artistic, do something physical, do something in nature. Like those are the basic tenets of actual rest, and actual downtime has to include those things. And it can't be, if your work is highly cognitive, you have to get out of that cognitive mindset. You have to get out of your prefrontal cortex. You got to get into something that's creative, that's artistically creative, that's social. Like socializing is actually, it's a great way to relax. It's really good for the body. Like we were talking about all the social benefits of being with friends and family and whatnot. Being exposed to nature is really powerful. And there's lots of great research that shows, there's one study that showed a 6-minute walk, or I think a 6-minute walk in nature increased creativity in these test subjects by 60%. Like their ability to solve cognitive challenges improved by 60%.
Why is that?
Because I'm not sure that anybody is 100% clear on that, but there is lots of research that shows being exposed to nature, to the color green, to breathing oxygen. So for one thing is that in any environment, like the environment we're in right now, the oxygen content is pretty, like the air quality is actually quite bad. It's completely different than being outside. So even just breathing deep air could be the solution. It could be moving more blood to the brain. It could be doing a bunch of things. Just getting up and walking around, like anything like that. So actually understanding like when you're going to take a break, take a real break.
Right.
If you're going to take time off in the evenings, do something that's actually cognitively relaxing for you. Same thing with the weekends, all that kind of stuff. Like that's the way, I mean, I say it and it feels really basic.
Oh, it totally.
But we're not doing that.
Yeah, go do it and then
like we're just not doing that.
Yeah,
we
don't want
really
to.
wild.
Like I don't. Yeah.
I built a sauna on my property. I do a lot of construction stuff that's one of the things that I do for rest, which is super fun.
Yeah.
But I built a sauna and now we'll try and get in the sauna 3-4 times a week in the evenings, and it's wild. Like we don't allow any technology in the sauna, and it's pretty hot in there. Probably melt your phone anyway, but it's dead quiet.
What do you go to? Sorry. Like how hot is that sauna?
I think it probably gets up to like 75, 80 degrees. Yeah. Like I don't know. We're trying to figure out, like, we're new to the sauna game. When we look at other saunas, they measure the temperature at the top,
which is not
which
accurate.
Would be no. I think that maybe is the way you measure it.
Really?
And I think that's because maybe that's the hottest it can possibly be is right at the top. So that's the safety place to measure. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway,
so there's no technology
at head height,
there.
It's 75, which is really hot.
Super hot, yeah.
And
but no technology in there.
No technology in there. It's dead quiet. Sometimes we'll sit in there in silence for an hour. Sometimes we'll talk.
Steve, an hour?
Yeah, but sometimes we'll sit and talk. But like getting that kind of downtime is incredible. Like my blood pressure is down.
Yeah.
I mean, not only saunas are great for blood pressure, but also just getting that time is really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then just sleep enough. Just sleep more.
Yeah. Totally. So,
right, Josh? How much are you sleeping?
Yeah, there's another reason why I was dreading this podcast today, because I
didn't
get a lot of sleep last night, man. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. It's cool, man.
You don't have to answer that.
Not enough. I'll say that. Not enough.
That's cool.
I tried to get a nap in this afternoon. Didn't really work. It's all good. Yeah, I was trying to design my day today, so I was like, okay, yesterday I was like, hey, I got this podcast with Steve Rio tomorrow. Like, I should really live this and really understand this on a deeper level. Okay, well, how would Steve fully optimize his day? So I'm looking at this. Okay, I got a couple meetings here. I need to do this chunk of work here, and I'm like, hey, how do I again like get to this deep work here, but then be fully like creatively aware for these meetings right here?
Right.
Like so really stimulate my creative brain there, but my intellectual brain here, and then try to turn off at this point, and then really just go for this. And like trying to.
You're like an ideal candidate for nature of work. When we get our program is almost done, I'll get you an advanced
that would
version of
make my life.
Yeah, I'll see what you think.
I would really
I'd love to
appreciate
get
that.
your feedback on it too,
dude. The whole human optimization game, I feel, is so young, and is or maybe it's not young. The research has been there for a while, but we're just being exposed to it now. I feel like I talk about North Stars a lot. Guys like Aubrey Marcus down in Austin, Texas, is a huge North Star for me.
Cool.
In terms of human optimization, from a health and wellness, from a supplement standpoint, from a physical standpoint, from a mental standpoint, from a psychedelic standpoint, from a meditation standpoint, from a relationship standpoint. He's dealing with shit right now that I can't even cognitively function. Like, I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, he and you and I look at both of you, and you have super similar parallels in terms of your train of thought. I don't know if you're aware of his work down there at all.
Only briefly, and you
right.
kind of put me onto him, so I've been checking him out. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the stuff that
he's wearing, like, San Diego or something, or
Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. Yeah, I knew he was down in the south somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, On an Academy is unreal. Super cool. He speaks a lot about, he used to speak a lot about, and still does, psychedelics. Yeah. But he was talking about it in 2010 and 2011. And don't get me wrong, man. Like, I grew up in that culture. So for me, like, psychedelics is not like a
out thing.
Yeah, far out thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's very close to home for me, I guess. I mean, I haven't gone super down that rabbit hole and would want to go more down, but you know what? It's never been that foreign to me. He's been talking about it for a long time now, and I feel like we are just starting to warm up to it.
Yeah, that's a huge wave coming.
You know,
I'm really excited about that.
Are you guys investigating? Are you personally investigating that at all, or?
I am. Like I'm spending quite a bit of time around. Like I'm really excited. UBC is raising money right now to launch a psychedelic research lab in Vancouver. So that's very cool.
Really cool.
There's some interesting people doing some very cool work around opening psychedelic treatment clinics, like kind of pressing the issue a bit. You know, like the way that the weed stores kind of did in Vancouver, where they just launched and then we figure
out the regulation
later.
Yeah.
There's some people kind of come in that direction around psychedelics in not necessarily directly in Vancouver, but in the Vancouver area. So I'm really excited about that. I've been thinking about how I can like start to contribute. Like I'd like to be an ongoing donor to the UBC lab. So I'm thinking about how I can get involved with that. And then I'm doing a ton of research. Like I did psychedelics in my early like in my teenage years and all that kind of stuff. I think growing up in BC, that's kind of just a thing.
Yeah. I think it is. I don't know.
At least not for everybody, but I've always found it I've always considered those experiences to be fairly formative in terms of how I see the world and think about things. And now I like we look at it much more scientifically, and I just think there's profound possibility, and it's just going to be a really important wave. Like I kind of think about weed being legalized to me is kind of whatever. It's okay. You know, I think it's good from a social justice perspective. I think there's a lot of, especially in the States where there's a lot of people of color who are arrested.
Absolutely.
Where white people aren't. And there's a lot of people in jail for weed related, for
atrocious.
nonviolent kind of things like that. So I think from a social justice perspective, there's some benefits to it. I don't necessarily think that everybody smoking weed all the time is good for society. I do think that the more people that can be exposed to psychedelic experiences and to seeing just what's around the bend in the mind and what's really going on is would have a profound impact on society. So I'm really excited about all that. Like, and I'm bullish about it. I'm interested in being an investor in it. Like I'm thinking about how I get more involved in that.
Totally.
Nature of work at this point is really focused not in that realm, but I see it as a very obvious potential expansion area as the laws start to change. I'm hopeful that Canada plays a key role in moving fast, and it sounds like we are. There's a lot of conversation around that. So I don't know. It's a super exciting time, man. I think like so much great research started in the 60s and 70s, and it was really like amazing what was happening there, and then it all got shut down. Right?
Yeah.
And like rarely has there been a thing where just like all this excellent research was happening, and then it just got frozen in time. Dark ages. Yeah. Like shut it down.
It's like space.
Yeah, and now it's all coming back, and like what we're seeing in terms of the impact of it is pretty wild.
Yeah.
And what's rad is like there's only 3 ways. So what psychedelics do in the mind is they shut down the default mode network. So what they do is they shut down the default mode network and allow different aspects of your brain to communicate where they normally couldn't. So what the default mode network is kind of like this gatekeeper in the brain. It basically says, oh, this part of the brain wants to talk to this part of the brain. Okay, you can come through me and I'll exchange some information. I'll broker some information between you, right?
Yes.
When you do psychedelics, that falls away. And so your brain starts going like this. And what's really wild about that is like suddenly parts of the brain that aren't supposed to be communicating are, and that's what creates the phenomenology of psychedelics, like all these experiences. What's super interesting is that the only other way that happens is through meditation.
Yes.
So people who are excellent at meditation, when they study the brains of Buddhist monks and deep meditators, the same thing is happening. The other time that happens, the other time we have ego dissolution and the default mode network falls away is when we're in flow states, when we're focused, when we're doing something we're passionate about. That's the thing we don't really talk a lot about is like, that's why doing things that are like meaningful to us, that are challenging, that, like that actually create flow states for us. That's why they're so pleasurable, because we're actually getting ego dissolution at that time. At that moment, there's no sense of time. There's no sense of space. You're just doing, like you're just going.
Yeah, you're being.
Yeah, and that's what I love. Like, so to me, nature of work is thinking about is thinking about how to help people reach that state more often, not necessarily through psychedelics, but just through focus
or whatever.
And meditation.
Yeah, meditation. And have you experienced sensory deprivation tanks at all?
I have, but I'm not in love with the ones that the city has here. Like, I don't really find them to be sensory deprivation. Like, I find that they don't smell great, and
that's true.
are kind of like,
I've been in one. Yeah, that's true.
like I don't know. True sensory deprivation should have no smell, no sight, no sound. I can hear the engine whirring. So, but I have had some pretty trippy experiences in them before.
Right.
Like some really interesting states that I've fallen into. Once I did.
Right.
The other times I did not.
Yeah, so you kind of just floating there.
I was like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
It's kind of weird in here. Creepy coffin full of water.
It's pretty weird. And if you're claustrophobic, it's not the way to go.
No.
At all.
Not recommended.
Not recommended at all. But yeah, no, those things are amazing. But it's like, okay, how do I make time for those things, right? Like, it's like, I'm really good at just being like, fuck that. Like, I got shit to do. Why am I worrying about flow states or meditation or sensory deprivation?
And all this stuff, I just think is like, if you just want to be like a cog and you just want to like pump out emails as fast as you can and do all that kind of stuff, like, that's fine. If you actually want to do deep work, if you want to make a difference, if you want to have big ideas, you need to create space. It's that simple. Any of the great thinkers of our time, they spend a tremendous amount of time wandering in the woods or like spacing out or taking naps and doing stuff, like doing things that created space. That's how deep thinking happens.
Yeah.
Is when that space, when the pond can get really, really, really calm and ideas just bubble up. That's the funniest thing for me about meditation. The hardest thing for me about meditation is that every time I meditate, ideas
yes.
It's just like,
what do you do? Do you write them down?
I finish meditating and I write them down.
Shit.
I try to. Not always. Sometimes just things I'm like, wow, how did I think of that?
That's profound.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I find, like when I was thinking about nature work in the early times, I was like, man, I'm constantly coming across very intelligent young people who I'm super inspired by. I'm like, wow, this person is going to be just amazing. And then they're not creative. Like they can't really think. And I had been wondering what was going on with that for a while. Like, why can't this very obviously intelligent, obviously hardworking, obviously caring person, can't they deliver any thoughtful, creative solutions?
Push the boundaries on things and find new ways.
Why can't, like, they can go to A to B, but they can't go from A to C, and like they can't. Yeah. And I've come to the conclusion, like, my theory at least is that for these folks, they're not creating enough space in their day to think. They're so busy doing that there's no time for thinking and for actually creating space for their subconscious to work. Like, that's how our brain works. We learn new information. It comes into our brain. About 6% of it goes into our prefrontal cortex, the conscious part of our brain. The rest of it goes into our subconscious brain, right? And the only way that the subconscious brain needs time to process it, to do correlation, to commit it to memory. And that's why when you actually create space, that's what's happening is your prefrontal cortex is lighting up, your subconscious brain is lighting up, and
gray matter,
and it's doing correlation work. That's why ideas just come effortlessly in those moments. Is like your subconscious brain actually has space to work. That's why when you're doing dishes or sometimes you're in the shower, or it's like when you've distracted yourself enough for your brain to go do its work, that ideas arrive. It's not from like sitting there and trying to grind out a great idea. That's rarely the method.
Yeah, but quite often the method I take. So with that, sorry, I'm just making little connections as you speak there. So earlier we talked about social media addiction, and attention versus intention.
Yeah,
and as a person that I want to fill every second of my day purposefully.
Yeah,
and I don't think that I'm productive while I'm creating space. Again, I think that same concept of intention versus attention. If you're putting intention towards nothingness, there's value there. But if you are not, and it is just mindless scrolling or whatever it may be, then there is no value there. So attention versus intention in terms of planning your day could be really powerful, I think.
I think having both, I didn't say attention versus intention.
Oh.
I said that you need decide what you're going to pay attention to.
Yes.
And then you need to do it with intention.
Do it with intention.
Yeah. Like to have intention. But to your point, like if you spend all of your free moments scrolling,
yes,
then you're not spending any time processing, thinking, learning, correlating ideas.
Yeah.
The other thing that's happening is we're seeing like a insane rise in anxiety, where the amount of anxiety is, we've never seen this before. It's never been the case. Anxiety used to be a fairly rare condition.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really simple that if the brain doesn't have time to process, it gets anxious.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, holy shit, like when do I get a break? When do I get to do, I have a whole bunch of backed up work here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sleeping that well because I'm like, you're on your phone late and like, so I'm not sleeping that well. I'm not getting enough REM sleep. That's another key time for processing. That's one of the most important times for processing. But also while we're awake, we need that time. Mm-hmm. And so just creating that space is also really key for managing anxiety. Mm-hmm. And it's a really fast way to do that.
Yeah, I think that we have a certain amount of energy that we need to devote in a day. And we need to, if we don't, our brain just knows, like, I don't know, there's no science behind this, or maybe there is, I have no idea. But our brain just knows if we are doing things purposefully or not. You know, our brain has a way of telling us that, hey, this is bullshit. If you accumulate a certain amount of bullshit in your day, your brain's just going to go, hey, no, bad.
I don't know if there's science behind that, but I like it.
You know what I mean? Like, essentially, it's just like, if you're filling your cup up with Coke, it's going to know. Like, your brain's going to know. Versus if you're filling it up with water, right? Yeah. Like, I don't know. That just makes sense to me in some way.
I think the bottom line is that, unfortunately or fortunately, we are running on a system that was designed a couple 100,000 years ago.
100%.
It was designed for a completely different lifestyle where most of our day was spent in leisure or in a relaxed state, where we had short bursts of high anxiety, hunting, protecting ourselves, running from a predator, whatever. Mm-hmm. And the rest of the time was spent in very low key environment, not doing much cognitively at all. Mm-hmm. And now we're in an environment where we are cognitively stressed from the very moment we wake up and we grab our phones to the very moment we go to sleep. And there's almost, like, for a lot of people, there is no break in that entire day. Even like, to the point, and I love podcasts and I listen to lots of them myself, but I have to manage how much I do, because even that, like, even when you go for a walk, it's like, or when you're driving to work or you're taking the bus, I'm going to fill that time with downloading information, learning information. Yeah. How many
audiobooks, podcasts.
How many hours? Yeah. How many audiobooks, how many podcasts can you listen to in a day, in a week, in a month? And frankly, like, it's not even productive because you're not able to process all that information.
Or implementing.
Right. No, that's what I mean. You're not, like, implementing any of that knowledge because you're not actually creating the space to do that. Oh. So I do think, like, with all of this stuff, I don't know who said it. I think maybe Doug Rushkoff said it, but there's an idea, like, think about creating moments of awe versus always with your media consumption. So create moments where you're really engaged and really, like, enjoying a piece of content versus always having content going, always having content coming in. So create moments of awe for yourself instead of always having consumption happening. Like, so what I've tried to get into is once in a while I listen to Joe Budden's podcast or something.
Yeah, for sure.
Because to me that's like just rap talk and just guys talking, and it's fun, right? So for me that's a relaxing thing I do once in a while. But often if I'm listening to a podcast with an interesting guest on, say, Sam Harris's podcast or something more business related, I'll try and say, like, okay, well, I'm going to spend the next hour listening to this podcast intentionally, and I'm going to take some notes, and I'm going to then think about it and think about how I might apply what I just heard into my life. Like, do it meaningfully, do it intentionally.
Totally.
As opposed to just blasting as many business podcasts as I can.
Yeah, that's the difference between you and me right there. That's the difference.
It just takes adjusting your kind of habits and thinking around it.
Yeah, I still have that run through a wall mentality.
Yeah. And frankly, I go through ebb and flow. Like, there's times where I realize, wow, I've just been smashing through a ton of podcasts. Like, time for a week of just ambient music or nothing. Like let's try and find some balance. You know, you kind of come in and out of that.
Yeah. When you create space, there's a lot of amazing things that happen. Mm-hmm. And I think that is totally true in young people that can't find breakthroughs, can't push boundaries, can't think creatively. It's like, shit, man, when am I going to have the time to think creatively or really ponder something? It's not, we live in a hustle culture as well, right? This hard work narrative has just been pushed down our throats, right? And I pushed it down my own throat, like 100%. So when you still talk about those young people, like, what do you look for in a young person? Well, so yeah, there's a ton of intelligent, hardworking people out there. Mm-hmm. It's just a fact, you know, and we have a system that builds those type of people.
Yeah.
Outside of that, what's important to you as a CEO of very successful companies?
That people are in it for the right reasons. Like they're, I don't expect them to be profoundly deep at 25 or something. Like they figured it all out, or they know exactly what they want in life. I actually don't expect that really at all. But I look for people that have a clear understanding of why they want to work for me or for one of my companies. Like what makes them want to be there, what's motivating them. I do look for what are their habits and how do they take care of themselves? Like what's their self-care look like beyond, like it's one thing to be a super achiever, but if you're doing that at the cost of sleep and the cost of everything else, I just know you're not going to be able to think very well.
It's not going to work.
Yeah. And also I don't expect people to know any of this stuff yet, because we're not really talking about it yet. Like I think Nature of Work is a fairly new, I mean, it's not like there's lots of great books on this stuff, but it's not commonplace knowledge, I don't think. And, and the practices are definitely not commonplace, right? So I don't necessarily expect people to be all over this stuff, but I do expect them to be open to learning it and to applying it and to making some adjustments and finding some balance in their life. Like I do look for people who are hustlers, who are self-motivated, who are, you know, who are taking responsibility for their own lives, who don't blame other people, who don't take credit for everything that they do. They give credit where credit is due and all that kind of stuff. And then on top of that is like, yeah, what is motivating you? Do you have good ethics and intentions with what you're doing? And are you, if you're already taking care of yourself, great. What are you doing there? And if you're not, are you willing to change a bit?
Yeah.
So that I can help you optimize yourself and take better care of yourself.
Are you open to the possibility that you're wrong? You know, like
totally. I mean, I am like I want to learn new things. I want to learn new things all the time.
Yeah,
for sure.
No, and it's a quality of a great intellectual leader.
And I think that's the other thing is like, I think what you just said is exactly right, but it's true for everybody. It's like you just got to be willing to be open, admit when you're wrong, learn new things. You know, be transparent about what you do and don't know. Like the thing that I think is the hardest, and it's easy to do when you're young because you feel like you kind of have to, but it's like to be like, yeah, I know how to do that. Yeah, like I got this. Like when you actually have no idea.
Hell, you did it.
Like it's one thing to say it and then go figure it out and then do it. Mm-hmm. It's another thing to be like bullshitting and to not be able to execute.
Bullshitting is bullshitting.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there is a fine line, because there is like I have bullshitted in my life and then quickly backfilled that with real information and knowledge and done something.
Oh, what a great time.
But then you get into these, I mean, you look at scenarios like the Theranos situation, like Elizabeth Holmes and her building like a multi-billion-dollar bullshit machine, you know, like, and probably hopefully going to jail for it. I mean, we'll see, but but it's wild what people get away with. So
no, totally. I couldn't agree more, man. That was one of the big, there's so many things that I've learned in the past year, but that's 100% one of them is like, dude, life is really long, you know, so if you're a young 20-something-year-old, humans have been on this planet and learning for, I don't know, 10,000 years. Yeah. Learning, you know, on a higher level, and that learning has, you know, definitely accelerated, you know, hockey stick for sure. Yeah. You're going to sit there and pretend that you know more than all of these people in all of time. Like, why is it that you think you've accumulated enough knowledge to bypass these people, or let alone bypass someone that, Steve, you're 40?
I'm 38. Yeah.
You're 38.
Yeah.
So you're more than double, or you're not more than double. You could, so I'm 22.
Yeah.
So if you're 44, you'd be double my age, right?
I've got a hell of a lot more adult years in my
100%.
Right? So yeah,
you're not, you know, if you were 44, I'd say you'd be like, oh, you have double my knowledge. No. That's hockey stick, bro. Yeah. Like that's hockey stick. Why don't you have enough humility to understand that, like the difference between a 20-year-old and a 21-year-old is vast. You know, why don't you have that much humility? So for me, myself, it's just like, listen, understand, especially me coming on this podcast, has been like, listen, understand that most of the ideas that you're going to put out are all hypothesis, and like stand by them right now because that's what you believe is true. And if it's coming from a genuine place, that's okay. Yeah. But just be completely open to the fact that the person sitting across the table from you more than likely knows 18 times as much as you, and just sit back and let that be okay.
On certain things, right? Yeah. Like it's really interesting. I think we're in a really different time than when I was like your age, in that your generation has exposure to so much information. And so one of the things like I think a lot about is that there's like a knowledge curve in your life,
right.
like information, how much information you can digest or consume, or how much knowledge you have.
Yes.
But then there's an experience curve. And like there was a time when, before the internet really, like, or before the internet was mainstream, your knowledge and your experience were pretty on par. Like in high school, you didn't know what the hell sex was until you started talking to people about it. Like you couldn't go online and watch porn. You couldn't hear. There wasn't like a million documentaries on Netflix. There's all sorts of things that you didn't learn about till you did them. Until you actually just, you learned from the older guy down the block, or you found out this thing and whatever. Like, but so your knowledge curve and your experience curve were roughly the same. But I think it's harder for, I think, a new generation right now, where the knowledge curve can be way up here, but your actual experience curve is way down here. So it's easy to feel like, man, I know everything. Like, what the fuck? There's like there's a blog post or a podcast or a YouTube video about any single possible thing you want to do.
Yes.
Doesn't mean you know how to do any of that shit, or know what it feels like to do it, or what goes into any of that, right? Like, but it's easy to feel like you're up there, even though you haven't experienced yet, and that you have to have experiences to get your experience to match up with that knowledge.
Totally.
Like, I just think it's a profoundly different time. And for a lot of young people, it's a really confusing thing, because you think, why am I not a manager yet? Why am I not being promoted yet? Why am I not rich yet? Why am I not rich yet? Like, I understand how to be rich now. I can see it on the internet. Like, even then, like, there was all you competed with was the kids on your block, or like the kids in your school. You didn't compete with the Kardashians. You didn't compete with like the richest rappers or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It's just it's a bit of a mind fuck, really. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I noticed that, and so I do think you're right. Like, you have to understand that the difference between having read something and learned it versus actually knowing how to apply it, or knowing anything about the underlying mechanisms of what's actually happening there,
or have taught it, or have communicated it too, right?
Yeah, I've done it.
I've done it many times, right? Yeah,
for sure.
So it's just a huge gap there. Yeah, which humbles me every fucking day.
Me too, man. Like, it's so interesting. I've been thinking a lot about, because I'm getting closer to 40, and I was thinking, man, like, I'm almost at 20. I'm about at 20 years of adult life, right? I was thinking, holy shit, man, I got another 20 to go before I'm even 60. Like, isn't that amazing? And it is exponential in terms of, like, to me, it's exponential in terms of how good life is, because you get more comfortable with yourself. You get more knowledge about who you are and what's important to you, and, mm-hmm. and you get better at things, and you get, your life expands and all that kind of stuff. And like, man, I'm so excited for another 20 adult years. Like, feels like I've lived a whole lifetime. Like, if I die tomorrow, I'm pretty happy with the life I've lived. I've done a ton of different things.
If you died yesterday, your life would be a victory.
Yeah, 100%.
100%.
At the same time, it's like, it's pretty wild that I get another 20 and I'm not even going to be 60.
It's crazy. And it's rad. Like, what's my prime?
Yeah.
Like, dude, you have 40 years of prime.
Yeah.
What if Steve Rio has 40 years of prime? That's so crazy.
Well, I mean, with all the technology coming down the lines, I could have 200 years of prime if I...
Listen. That's another podcast, and we'll get there.
Yeah, we're getting late.
We are super late tonight right now. We're not going there for sure. Yeah. But there's a couple. Listen, I could go deeper on that as well. There's a couple things that I have to ask you. We talk about skills, and we talk about what you look for in a person, and we talk a lot about productivity and all these different things. One of the things I'm learning as a young person is, how the hell do I manage these relationships? Manage these relationships as someone who wants to be highly productive, manage these relationships with significant others, manage these relationships with family members. You're someone, like, I look at high achievers like yourself, and I'm like, how the fuck do they manage these relationships that they clearly value? So in that, I don't, like, it's easy to say, well, I make time, right? Like, make time. Yeah, that makes sense. But if you're running a multi-million-dollar company and you get a call from your head in San Francisco and you're at the dinner table, you have to take that. So how do you really make time for your family in 2019?
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting is when I met Paris, and like, first off, when I met my wife, but then when I met Paris,
interesting how you word
my
that.
daughter, but like, that changed everything, because it suddenly it became very crystal clear that business is just business. And like, there's only two people on the world that I have to pick up the phone for, is my wife and Paris.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's it. Nobody else do I have to. Like obviously my mom or my brother, like there's other family members, but like that's where it's 100%. Those are two people that I'll drop anything for and walk out of any room, any meeting, doesn't matter how important it was, doesn't matter. Like, that's just what you do. Mm-hmm. So you actually, I think, if you get it right and you realize what's most important, like if you really get your head on straight about that, like, business becomes more of like, this is a vehicle to create success for myself, to learn, to have fun. These are my hobbies. Like, I'm lucky enough to do things I love to do. That's mm-hmm. awesome. But at the end of the day, they're not what's most important. So mm-hmm. unless, there are certain times where I have to pick up the phone for sure. And there's a lot of times where I do not. Mm-hmm. And I don't. Like, mm-hmm. I just don't. Like, I don't allow, my phone goes into airplane mode about 9:00 at night, or like sometimes earlier. If I'm in my sauna, my phone is far away from me. Like, there's lots of, I create space for that. Now, that might be different in environments if I had like $100 million, $200 million business, or something like that. But even then, I think there's a bit of fabrication that we've created around all that. There was a time when nobody had cell phones and businesses were $100 million and shit happened and it was fine. Like, we just picked it up in the morning and solved it then.
Yeah.
Like, we've created a bit of fabrication around it. So I think it's the culture you create in your companies. It's the expectations you set with the people around you. It's how you think about those things that defines what you end up falling into. It's mm-hmm. up to you. Like, I think a lot of people are just stuck in the ego of it. Like, oh man, I'm so important that I have to take this. Like, have to take this. It's a status symbol to be that busy. Like my phone's on Do Not Disturb. It's in my bag over there. Like,
you haven't checked it in 2.5 hours.
No, like, that's not a big deal. Like, one half of the two people that matter are in the room, so I'm pretty good right now. But like, I think it's a status symbol thing too. So I just think right. you got to create the reality for yourself around that. Yeah.
No, you've fabricated your life in a pretty epic freaking way, and that takes a lot of discipline. That just being like, oh no, there's two people, I pick up my phone. That's it. That's like, I'm not there yet. Yeah. I wish I was, but that's hard. Like, that's really hard. And
that's and there's like, the way I use my phone today is it's on Do Not Disturb 24 hours a day. Mm-hmm. But there's a whole handful of people that are on my favorites list kind of thing that it will buzz for when they call or text.
Right.
And that includes like my management team and my immediate family and my best friends. Right.
Right.
But otherwise, like, my phone doesn't buzz for anything, no notifications or anything. Like, I just don't mm-hmm. use it for that. Mm-hmm. Like, and again, that's just conditioning and setting expectations and yeah, for the people that are important, they know that they shouldn't slack me if it's super important. They should pick up the phone and call. And if they're close to me, they're on my favorites list and they're going to get through to me.
Yeah.
But there's also like, you're not going to call me about a business contract that went sideways at 9:00 at night. I don't care at 9:00 at night. And the last thing I want to do is not get a good sleep that night because I'm sitting there grinding about how to solve this problem.
Yeah.
I want to find out in the morning.
Totally.
After I've done my meditation, after I've done my morning yoga, after I've like set my intentions for the day, that's when I want to find out about the problem. Because at that moment, I am primed to think clearly. I've slept well.
Yes.
I'm ready to operate. Like, I'm ready to execute at a very high level at that moment.
I love that. I'm still working to engineer my life that way. Or like, when you are primed and you've done whatever routine you have in the morning, like, oh man, is work exciting. Like I'm awesome. I'm like jittery. Like, it's fun,
100%. And the other thing about that is I don't want my staff responding to an angry client at 9 at night.
Right.
Like, when they're tired and they're exhausted and maybe they had a glass of wine or whatever, like, I don't want them rattling off some shitty email to them at 9, like a bad reactive email. I also don't want them waking up the first thing in bed, half awake, responding to the same any type of email to anybody.
Yeah.
I want them to get their head in the right space, to get focused, to get clear, and to respond effectively.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
And thoughtfully.
Yeah. And with intention. Okay, I'll end with a bang. So I've drawn parallels towards.
I thought it was gonna be a rap question.
Nah, bro, come on now.
That's cool. No,
that's cool. I'll think of something in the meantime.
What's up?
I told you I was a fan of Aubrey Marcus. I draw parallels between you two. You guys are thinking about a lot of the same things and moving in similar ways. I find that inspirational, and I draw a lot of knowledge from those things. You guys are both.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Oh, dude, like 100%.
Cool.
It's astonishing. It's astonishing to have lined you up as a guest and dived into the work that you've done, and simultaneously been a fan and watched the work that he's done there. Like, it's literally on the exact same. Like, you guys are just hearing you talk or hearing you speak on podcasts, the way your mind works. It's, anyways, I won't get there, but watch me get squirmish on this as well. Like, I'm on board with everything. And I'm open to everything as well. You guys both talk about being in open relationships, which is something I find to be so out of left field. Open relationships.
And no, I'm not in.
No, you're not in an open relationship? No. Okay, so that's good, because I was going to be like, Steve, what the hell? That's hilarious. So Aubrey talks about being in an open relationship.
Talk about that?
I think it wasn't in your one pager, or it's just late at night. I'm crazy.
It probably says something about being open and something, but not in an open relationship.
Okay, because I was going to be like, Steve, that's crazy. I can't see you as that type of person. No. But that's really cool too.
My wife and I have like a fairly, open thoughts about all that kind of thing.
Right.
But we're not in an open relationship. No.
Crazy. So there's so many different like societal constructs that you're bending. Yeah. Like you're in Nature of Work and Briteweb. Yeah. And I was like, holy shit, is he bending this one too? You know, you talk about psychedelics and all these different things. And I'm like, man, this guy is like truly a revolutionary.
That's when I think people should do whatever they are most comfortable with, as long as it's really healthy. Like, as long as it's, I think when you get, if you're too possessive with people, anybody, whether it's your partner, whether it's your friends, whether it's anybody, like, that's not a positive thing. I think the people who can really do open relationships in a really healthy way, that's a very deep,
crazy, positive
relationship.
Yeah.
But I think it all comes down to what's your relationship with sex? Like, what does sex mean to you?
Right.
Like, is sex the deepest thing in your relationship, or is there something deeper than sex? And is there and so, like, it's stuff that my wife and I actually talk about, but we're not in an open relationship now. But like, yeah, I agree. I think it's something. I just think it's something that people. I guess I don't blink when I think about somebody being in an open relationship versus anything else. Like, I don't think there's anything. I think if anything, being in a single committed sexual relationship your whole life may be a less natural thing than anything else. I do think that we're evolved enough to do that well, and that, like, all I care about is that my wife and I are creating the deepest bond possible, that we are like a single unit in this universe. And to me, that's profoundly, it's just so powerful. It's just so powerful what's possible when you have that level of trust. And so I think some people can have that and have totally open relationships. Some people have relationships where they bring others into their sexual encounters, and I think that's cool. And there's lots of ways to think about that.
Very cool. So even without going there, you're still thinking about it and pushing the boundaries there in terms of just conceptually what does that mean for us as a whole. It's very cool. With all this stuff that you talk about and you dedicate your life and your work to, what are you pushing the boundaries on with your thought? Like, what's on your mind right now? Where are you trying to explore? What's next for you? Like, you're already so many spots that are so deep and profound. Where are you going from here?
I mean, I think the thing I think about the most right now, and it's going to be really, really simple, is, and this came out of an experience I had recently, but it's something that just popped in my head, was just, how do I be generous in every moment? How do I be grateful in every moment? So I think one of the biggest antidotes for all of the guilt complex, the never-ending grind, the anxiety, all of the pressure that we put on ourselves, and always like hitting the next point and just already thinking about, hitting a goal and already being on to the next goal, and not even and often also for myself, being someone who forgets to stop and be generous both with myself and with those around me because I'm moving so fast sometimes.
Right.
The thing I think about the most is how can I be generous in every moment? And that's like, it sounds really simple, but that's something that I'm really pushing myself on.
Oh yeah.
Is to be generous both to myself and to those around me at all times, because what comes out of that, like what I'm realizing as I get through all this stuff, it doesn't matter what kind of car you're driving, what kind of house you're in, where you are in the world. At the end of the day, you're in your body and you're in your own brain. Like you're just sitting there with your own thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're generous with people around you, and if you're giving and you're grateful,
mm-hmm.
then you feel good. And it doesn't, and if you're not, then it doesn't matter if you're in a Lamborghini or
mm-hmm.
like whatever, you're not going to feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, that's all we got. Like all we have is how we feel in our moment right now.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's practicing generosity and gratefulness.
That's amazing. Yeah, man. Food is food, water is water, shelter is shelter, and the rest is mental. To quote Big Crit. Speaking of Big Crit, top 5 rappers alive.
Alive.
So you can't do the dead ones because the dead, you feel
That's
it right
fine.
there.
That's fine.
You got it on deck just like this? Oh, come on.
I can probably come up with it pretty quick. Andre 3K.
Okay.
Jay. Gets a little tricky, doesn't it? Kendrick. I'll give Kendrick one of those spots.
Kendrick gets the nod.
Kendrick gets the nod. I think anybody who says otherwise has kind of got to be a hater right now. Like, shit. 2 more spots.
This is big. Like this is big. We might put this at the start of the podcast.
I'm thinking about like I can go intellectual on it, or I can go pure energy on it.
Pure energy, gut feeling.
Because like I might want to say Lil Wayne because he had a huge impact on the game. He did.
He did. He does.
He does. So Lil Wayne maybe. Shit.
Oh, the tension in the room right now is crazy.
Fifth.
I mean, like,
who am I missing? Who am I missing?
Cole.
Nah. Cole. Who?
Earth Gang. God damn.
Yeah, like I think you give Earth Gang a couple years, they might be.
They might be.
Yeah, like especially one of them. I don't know the names of them, but they actually, I'd be out on that, like looking out for them. To me, they are doing.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Unbelievable
JID,
shit right
the
now.
whole thing. Yeah.
But
Drake, I don't know.
Like pure impact, you have to give Drake that, but I just don't think of Drake like that. Like I think of him as a fantastic performer, pop star, all those things.
Yes.
Pure rapper, like if we're talking about rapper.
Yeah.
Nah.
Okay, so 3K, Jay, Wayne, Kendrick.
Oh man, who else?
Listen, we're gonna put it at the start of the podcast, so people will hear this, and based off this, they'll be like, "I'm tuning in" or "I'm tuning out."
Yeah, yeah, right. Alive. This is where I wish I actually had my phone. I could flip.
Go through the playlist. Go through the recently played.
Y'all think Cole? You guys put Cole on this?
Cole, yeah. He's one of my favorites.
Is he?
Yeah.
I respect Cole. I don't find him engaging enough for me. Like, I like a little bit of attitude.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know. I'm just gonna go.
Steve gave us a top 4.
I'll give you a top 4.
I'll take it.
Alive? I don't know. There's got to be somebody else alive that I'm not thinking of. I'll have to come back to it, man.
That's all right.
I'll give you a top 4.
That's all right. Nah.
Like, in one way I could put Kanye in that list. Another way I could put him anywhere close to any list.
Any list at all.
He was just doing gospel music on a hill.
You could put, yeah. I mean, you could put.
But he had a massive impact on the game. But yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I gave you 4. That was
Steve top 4. I like it.
Yeah.
Yo, Steve, this is crazy long, and I appreciated every second of it. Learned a ton of it, and a ton about you, a ton about industry, a ton of stuff. I like that you bring a perspective that is like, I hate getting too freaking self-helpy, and you're very practical. Like everything you do is rooted in practicality.
Yeah, for sure.
Like that is so freaking important. And so I appreciate your time. You value your time, and giving it to us and this podcast and this team means a shit ton to me. So I appreciate you giving a young guy your time. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
And I know that everyone listening really appreciated it. So
right on.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, man.
That's a wrap.